Chapter 1149. Jiyu Yangying said to Sai Bao, take your child home first. Okay. Sai Bao came before Li Qingshan and extended her hands to the tigress girl. Come with me. The tigress girl stared at her. Go find your mother. Li Qingshan handed the tiger girl, who was filled with reluctance, to Sai Bao and watched them leave. Let's talk somewhere else. Jiyu Yangying said. Where to? Li Qingshan furrowed his brows as if a storm was gathering. East, Yunju. You don't need help. I heard that the winged men are not easy to deal with. Li Qingshan did not expect Jiyu Yangying to be so decisive. Although he could not wait to go to the city amongst the clouds and beat up his mother, then his whole family, and teach these damned kidnappers what the word death meant. This matter is difficult to solve with strength alone. I'm still not strong enough, Li Qingshan said. His military exploits could be considered illustrious, but the winged men still dared to do this. They must be fearless. You can say that. Jiyu Yangying flew higher into the sky and blended into the fierce astral winds. Li Qingshan followed closely behind. The matter you want my help with is related to the winged men, right? To be more precise, it's related to the winged men king. The further east they went, the denser the clouds in the sky became. In the end, it was almost endless. The clouds were piled up and down, and thunder and lightning could be seen from time to time. Bai Jie brought Li Fengyuan and passed through the clouds. Why does your king want to see me? Li Fengyuan tried to break free, but the white belt of light was stronger than he imagined and firmly restrained his power. You'll know when you get there, Bai Jie said. Do you know who my father is? His surname is Li Qingshan. You know? Like father, like son. Legend has it that the phoenix has 5 virtues: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. You spoke rudely, which is rude. You asked such a stupid question, which is unwise. You promised to follow me to the city amongst the clouds, but you tried to escape, which is untrustworthy. You can only be considered a little benevolent. I may be rude, unwise, and untrustworthy, so that I can be as shameless as you. Bai Jie let out a cold snort and shook the white ribbon. Li Fengyuan fell into the black cloud mountain that was flashing with lightning and rumbling thunder. When he was lifted up again, the feathers on his body were standing up and he shouted, Shameless, shameless, shameless. Call me whatever you want. I can't be bothered to stoop to your level. Shameless woman, you're in big trouble now. After flying for an unknown period of time, a city suddenly appeared between the clouds. Towering white palaces seemed to be formed from white clouds, shining white in the sunlight. However, upon closer inspection, only the tallest palace in the center was truly pure white. The surrounding palaces were slightly inferior, gradually turning milky white and even grayish white. However, they all had the same texture of clouds, lightly floating high up in the sky. One by one, the winged people spread their wings and soared between the clouds. All of them were beautiful and wore broad clothes. Their words and actions were elegant, and they emitted a tranquil and auspicious aura. This is the city amongst the clouds, Bai Jie said proudly. What's so great about it? Li Fengyuan said disdainfully. A pair of tall cloud pillars could be considered the city gate. The cloud pillars were engraved with layers of cloud patterns, and a strange sculpture with a human face and bird's body sat on top of the cloud pillars. It wore a pointed crown on its head. The instant Li Fengyuan crossed the cloud pillars, he seemed to have entered another world. That tranquil and auspicious aura seemed to invade his body. Bai Jie, don't be rude to our guest. Hurry up and untie him. A clear and sonorous voice came from the tallest palace. Yes. After arriving at the city amongst the clouds, Bai Jie wasn't afraid of letting Li Fengyuan escape. She waved her sleeve and retrieved the white ribbon. Li Fengyuan stretched his body and said calmly, Let's go. Let me see your king. The graceful and dignified bearing of the phoenix's inheritance was displayed. Moreover, he had the decisiveness of I'll go against thousands of people. Bai Jie's expression was somewhat astonished. Just now, at that moment, she actually felt a trace of shame. This was the bearing that a phoenix should have. On the spotless white street, the feathermen lined the streets to welcome him. They sprinkled flowers and played their zithers, as if they were truly welcoming a distinguished guest. Bai Jie also took a step back and followed behind, letting him enjoy this honor alone. Li Fengyuan stepped on the soft clouds and walked forward calmly. The phoenix never lacked glory, nor did it need glory. When he arrived in front of the palace in the center of the city, there were 2 rows of cloud pillars in the plaza in front of the palace. On top of each pillar sat a sculpture with a human face and bird's body. However, there was a subtle difference in their expressions. When he passed through the plaza, he would feel that he was constantly being watched. Climbing up the tall steps, Li Fengyuan looked up and saw the 3 large words Divine Feather Palace shining brightly under the sunlight. Quickly invite him in. The clear and magnificent voice came from the palace again. Li Fengyuan acted as if he didn't hear it. He looked left and right and admired the carvings on the palace gate. Bai Jie reached out and pushed him into the palace. The palace was filled with intoxicating incense. There were many crane-shaped incense burners emitting white smoke. The warm sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the palace seem even more spacious. A figure was faintly discernible in the smoke. "Welcome, divine bird phoenix." A handsome and sunny man stood up from the white jade throne and opened his arms. The pure white wings that were originally folded behind him suddenly spread out with his movement, scattering the smoke. They emitted an invisible light that made the sunlight dim. "My name is Li Fengyuan, King of Feather Men, Bai Chen." "You're about to die," Li Fengyuan said. "What did you say?" The King of Feather Men calmly walked down from the throne. His long white robe trailed behind him. He smiled and said, "Who can kill me?" Whether it was power or influence, he was at the top of this world. "Time," Li Fengyuan said. "Oh." The King of Feather Men lowered his eyes. "No matter how strong the incense is, it can't hide the stench on your body." Li Fengyuan sniffed. Although it wasn't actually a smell, it was more like an intuition, an aura of aging and decadence. Maintaining a youthful appearance is just deceiving yourself, not to mention that pretentious tone of voice. You aren't the light of the day, but the twilight, as expected of the divine bird phoenix. Not all life forms can live forever like you. Even celestials have 5 periods of decline. But please show some respect. It's good for both of us. The King of Feather Men's expression darkened. As he frowned, wrinkles began to spread. Even his voice became deep and hoarse, like an old man. Li Fengyuan suddenly felt that he couldn't breathe. He was obviously so old, but he was also so powerful, as vast as the sky. Glancing at the base of the Feather Man King's pure white wings, he suddenly found a little bit of color. It was a pale blue feather, but it was better than all the other pure white feathers, which made him feel a sense of familiarity. He raised his head and said, "What do you want from me?" "Time." Chapter 1150. What I'm searching for is a feather. The light of hope shone in Jiyu Yangying's eyes. Li Qingshan thought back. In the battle against the Corpse King on Burial Mound Mountain, you once used a feather to make space extremely fragile, which was how I managed to kill the Corpse King successfully. That was a feather of a space-splitting bird. Although it's extremely rare, it's not particularly difficult to obtain. Yeah. With the Protector Hawk God taking action, what can't we obtain? As a father, he's not as benevolent as you. Jiyu Yangying smiled. The gentle way he carried the tiger girl had truly taken her by surprise. What's wrong with that? Heartless might not necessarily be a true hero. How can a man not pity his child? Li Qingshan said. After all, she was his own flesh and blood. How could he not feel anything? Since he had feelings, there was no need to pretend. Heartless might not necessarily be a true hero. How can a man not pity his child? Jiyu Yangying repeated. Unfortunately, that's not the case in the cultivation community. Everyone uses their feelings as a burden. There are countless people who want to become heartless and emotionless. Like you. I'm not. In the eyes of the world, you're actually very heartless. That's true. The 2 of them were speechless for a moment. They flew through the boundless sky again, passing through countless clouds and mountains. We're almost there, Jiyu Yangying said. The city amongst the clouds. Li Qingshan gazed into the distance. No. Look up. Jiyu Yangying pointed upwards. Li Qingshan raised his head. All he saw was a haze extremely high up in the sky. It was rather difficult to make out what it was against the pure blue background. However, he could clearly sense that the space was rather strange, but it was not ripped apart like the demon cavern or the gate of hungry ghosts. It was more like it had been stirred into chaos. As a result, he waved his hand and unleashed the profound light illuminates all, pulling the chaos closer to him. In that moment, a strange power seemed to extend over. The spirit turtle's profound shell twisted and deformed. However, just now, Li Qingshan had already discovered that the chaos was much larger than it seemed. It enveloped a radius of 100 kilometers, and its depth was immeasurable. He could not help but ask, "What is that?" About 10 years before you were born, a feather fell from the sky. It pierced through the barrier of this world, and here are the traces left behind. Jiyu Yangying gazed at the chaotic void with an expression of reverence. A feather. Li Qingshan was astounded. If the world was like an egg, then this barrier would be the eggshell. It was practically indestructible, even though he had the tremors of the ox demon. Moreover, the higher one went, the stronger the astral winds would be. It would be difficult to even approach it. Regardless of whether it was the demon's den, the gate of hungry ghosts, or the blood-colored vortex in the Azura field, the reason why they could create a hole and connect to this world was because the demon's domain, hungry ghost realm, and Azura realm were countless times larger than the 9 provinces. It was equivalent to borrowing the power of the world. Even so, it was extremely difficult to expand. Even Fiend Celestial Cheongqi had to pass through the demon cavern in order to descend, and he had to pay a considerable price. It was unimaginable for an individual to fight against the world, because the energy possessed by the two was on a completely different order of magnitude. Because of this, the scene before him was completely beyond common sense. It's very powerful, isn't it? Just the fall of a feather easily pierced through the barrier of the world, and it might not even have been intentional. And the residual effects caused the world to be unable to repair even now. It's just a feather. Can you imagine what kind of existence its owner is? Jiyu Yangying kept sighing, a complete change from her usual carefree and calm demeanor. She was like a child describing a toy that she liked to the extreme but could not obtain. Li Qingshan pondered. It was not completely unimaginable. Brother Ox's power was probably not below that of the feather's owner. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly stirred. 10 years before I was born. If he counted it, Brother Ox had appeared in his cowshed at that time. Could there be some connection between the two? This feather is now in the city amongst the clouds. To be more precise, it's with the king of feather humans, Bai Chen. At that time, there was a battle, and all the feather demon kings in the world sensed it. My father also tried to snatch it, but in the end, Bai Chen was the first to get it. The truth is really hard to predict. Perhaps the feather humans are also considered feather humans? I'm not sure, but if it hadn't fallen into his hands, even if my father got this feather, he would have had a lot of trouble. You said that all the feather demon kings sensed it? Yes, it's like a summoning. My father speculated that there might be an inheritance in it. Even if there is no true inheritance, just the power contained in this feather and the information stored is enough for a feather to step into the realm of extraordinary. Speaking of this, I really envy your godson. He was born a divine bird phoenix, and his talent and bloodline are unparalleled. Ascension is just a matter of time. Even if he goes to a higher world, he will still have a great advantage. And I still have some backing in the 9 regions, but once I ascend, I will no longer have any advantage. My half-human, half-demon bloodline will even become a disadvantage. Whether I go to the human path or the beast path, it will be somewhat awkward. If I want to go further, I must establish a greater advantage before I lose my advantage. I seem to have said too much. You can understand my feelings, right? Maybe you can't understand. After all, the inheritance you have is also beyond imagination. I hope to get help from you. All right, I can understand, and I will do my best to help you. Even without you, I would still fight with you, the Feather Demon King. Li Qingshan looked at Jiyu Yangying, who had become a little long-winded and felt a little embarrassed. He had such a great advantage that he really did not have the right to call himself the daughter of the eagle god. Moreover, she was constantly fighting to change her fate. Thank you. Jiyu Yangying nodded slightly and returned to normal. But you still don't understand. The reason why I brought you here is to tell you that this matter can't be solved with pure power. After so many years, even if the Feather Demon King has not completely refined that feather and accepted the inheritance, as long as he can exert a little of its power, it will be very terrifying. I even suspect that he is already the strongest in the world. Then how did you originally plan to deal with him? I didn't plan to deal with him. According to the lifespan of the Feather Demon King, he has long reached the limit, and all the methods to prolong his life have been used up. I originally planned to outlive him to death. All the people hiding in the dark who covet him will take the opportunity to make a move. Although the forces in the city amongst the clouds are strong, they will definitely fall into chaos, and I will be able to take advantage of the situation. Jiyu Yangying stretched out her hand and grabbed at the air. Like a hunting eagle, she seemed to have already caught the magical feather in her hand. At that time, even the eagle god would be her opponent, and they might have to fight for it with their own methods. She had already prepared many methods, and Li Qingshan would be her strongest helper. However, when she opened her hand, she found that it was empty. She could not help but smile helplessly. She had originally hoped that the Feather Demon King would be able to endure for a few more years, giving her enough time to grow. Only then would she be more confident in the future. Who would have thought that there would be such a change? The Feather Demon God, who had disappeared for many years, would actually appear in the 9 prefectures again. The power that the phoenix possessed was the symbol of eternal life. The Feather Demon King must have taken Li Fengyuan away to prolong his life. If he was left alone, no one could estimate how long he would last this time. It could be 100 years, 1,000 years, or even longer. Chapter 1151. Bai Chen's face returned to being handsome and healthy, looking like an immortal in the dense clouds. He bowed slightly. I hope you will not be stingy with your gifts. I will treat you as an honored guest. It's really because of this. Li Fengyuan naturally understood the meaning behind his words. If he refused to cooperate, then he could only become a prisoner. This was also the main reason why his second father refused to let him leave Fire Melt Mountain. His phoenix bloodline had always been the most precious heavenly resource. There was no cultivator who would find their lifespan too long. He took a step back and spread open his arms, forming a pair of brilliant wings. His entire body swirled with brilliance, and raging divine flames illuminated the entire divine feather palace. Make your move, winged human king. How unwise. Don't you understand that you're no match for me? Bai Chen was a little angry. The surrounding void surged. I know that the chance of defeating you is less than 1 in 10,000. But even if I don't have that kind of power, I should at least prove my courage. I will not surrender until I fight. Li Fengyuan charged at the winged human king with blazing splendor and flames. The winged human king in front of him suddenly disappeared. At the same time, Li Fengyuan felt a tight grip on his neck, and the blazing splendor and flames disappeared in an instant. You won't surrender unless you fight. I think it's a mantis trying to stop a chariot, really refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Bai Chen stared coldly at Li Fengyuan. All right. The battle is over. I'll be the guest of honor. Li Fengyuan raised his hands with a helpless expression. Then, he looked at Bai Chen's pure white wings, at the only speck of mixed color. Humph, at least you know what's good for you. Bai Chen slowly let go. It was not that he was magnanimous. Instead, he needed to use the phoenix blood to extend his lifespan, and only Li Fengyuan's cooperation could achieve the best effect. Li Fengyuan rubbed his neck and thought to himself, this isn't teleportation, it's just speed. How could it be so fast? It's unbelievable. The source of the power seems to be that azure feather, and it seems to be related to my bloodline. But it's definitely not a phoenix feather, so what is it? The phoenix was the god of the feathered species. He was related to many divine birds by blood. Almost all feathered species were known for their speed, so it was difficult to tell which type the pale green feather belonged to. He shouted loudly, "Is this how the winged people treat their guests? I'm thirsty and hungry. I want wine and meat. Quickly prepare a feast for me." Bai Chen gave him a deep look. He clapped his hands. Bai Jie stepped into the hall. He respectfully said, "What instructions does my king have?" "Go and prepare the banquet. Prepare to welcome our esteemed guest." "Yes." Bai Jie retreated, and Li Fengyuan also followed her out of the hall, as if he was in his own home. "Where are you going?" Bai Chen frowned. "Let's go for a walk in the city." "Can't I? I'm an honored guest." "Don't be rude," Bai Jie shouted. Bai Chen waved his hand and said, "It's fine. As long as we don't leave the city amongst the clouds, we can go anywhere. Do you need a guide?" "No need." Li Fengyuan stepped out of the main hall and flew away. "My king, why did you let him go?" "The divine bird is nothing special," Bai Jie said. "It's fine. Although I don't have much time, I can still wait for a day." Bai Chen smiled lightly and praised, "You did very well in this matter. It's a pity that we couldn't invite that Li Qingshan. He just defeated the Dragon King in the Ink Sea. He might be a problem." Bai Jie was somewhat worried. "That's really extraordinary. Although such a person is rare, it's not like I haven't seen him before. If he wants to come, then let him come. I'll let him stay here forever." "I heard that he also has the bloodline of the phoenix, right?" Li Fengyuan wandered around the city, trying his best to think of a countermeasure. He kept coming to the edge of the city, intentionally or unintentionally. However, when he saw the towering pillars of clouds, he gave up on the attempt to charge out. The formation of the city amongst the clouds was not that easy to break. Even if he was lucky enough to charge out, he would definitely not be able to escape the pursuit of the Feather Human King. No matter how he thought about it, he could not think of any good ideas. After all, any ingenious plan had to be built on the foundation of strength. If I can survive another heavenly tribulation, I might have a way to escape." In the evening, the sky was clear and bright, and the stars were incomparably resplendent. In the Divine Feather Palace, the banquet had just begun. Bai Chen sat high on the throne and raised his wine cup high. "Dear ministers, please raise your cups together to welcome our esteemed guest, the divine phoenix bird Li Fengyuan." He then asked Li Fengyuan beside him, "Fellow Daoist, are you satisfied with this reception?" "Satisfied, satisfied." Li Fengyuan looked around. There were actually more than 10 experts who had survived 3 heavenly tribulations in the palace. And Bai Jie said that there were still a few who were cultivating and unable to rush over. This was the foundation and strength of the feather human race. However, the most dangerous opponent was still the Feather Human King, Bai Chen, who was sitting on the throne. What exactly was that pale green feather? "Eldest father, I know that you love your son, but don't rush over directly and fall into this bastard birdman's trap. If there are no flaws, then think of a way to create one. If snatching doesn't work, then steal it." Jiyu Yangying's eyes turned into a sharp eagle's eyes, filled with determination. "Steal? At our realm of cultivation, how are we supposed to steal?" Li Qingshan really did not find this to be any different from snatching. None of them were mortals. Their senses were extremely sharp, not to mention that the feather had grown from the Feather Human King. "It might be a little risky, but all I can do is try it again." Jiyu Yangying glanced at the chaos in the sky again. "The scenery up there is very beautiful, but it's a pity that we're in a hurry. I'll take you there again if we have the chance. Let's go." "Where are we going this time?" "The Frost Province, Sleep Valley." The north wind swept up large snowflakes into the air. The world seemed to become chaotic as snowy giants stood on the icy plains. The Frost Province was even larger than the Mist Province. It was known as the largest province in the world, so it had its own sense of vastness. "What snow!" Li Qingshan praised. If the little phoenix had not been captured, he really wanted to drink to his heart's content in this sight. There just happened to be someone accompanying him. The wind and snow swirled up Jiyu Yangying's clothes and long sleeves. She stared ahead attentively and pointed. "We're here. That's White Elephant Mountain." Li Qingshan went up to stand beside her. All he saw was a great snowy mountain on the icy plains. It was like a huge, white elephant galloping through the wind and snow, with a vague, black line. Arriving before the mountain, he saw a deep, narrow valley that split the mountain in half. This is Sleep Valley, a renowned forbidden ground. There doesn't seem to be anything special about it. Li Qingshan gazed into the distance. There was no danger in the valley at all. Even the spirit turtle did not sense any danger. If it were not for the extremely dense spiritual qi, it seemed like a regular valley. You'll know once you go in. Be careful not to fall asleep. Chapter 1152. The demon wolf suddenly stiffened, and all of its hair stood on end as if it had been frozen in Li Qingshan's vision. Li Qingshan said, "Oi, is there a strange demon wolf over there? That's very normal. This is the world of wolves." Jiyu Yangying continued onwards without even looking back. The wolf god is basically your uncle. You've come to his territory, yet you're not even going to pay him a visit. Li Qingshan understood. The Skyfrost Wolf King of the 10 Demon Kings, as well as the second boss of the Hawkwolf Guard that stood on par with the Protector Hawk God, watched over the Frost Province. Have you ever seen a hunter whose hawk and hound are good friends? Fair enough. Compared to the Dragon Province, this really is a land of bitter cold. No matter how close they are to their master, a hound is still not as loved as a hawk. As a result, Li Qingshan no longer paid any attention to the demon wolf. He made his way into the depths of the valley with Jiyu Yangying. The demon wolf shuddered and heaved heavily. What a terrifying gaze. It's basically on par with the Wolf King's. No, I need to report this to the Wolf King immediately. It turned around and leapt up, vanishing into the wind and snow. You're wrong about that. My uncle Wolf was the one who requested to come to the Frost Province. Not only is he a demon king, but he's also the lord of a province, or as the people of the Frost Province call him, the Great Chanyu. The human cultivators of the Frost Province actually agreed. Where's the original Great Chanyu? He was wiped out when Great Xia was founded. The Frost Province is vast and sparsely populated. Mortals all live as nomads, and their method of cultivation is rather, ancient. You should have seen quite a lot in the Mist Province. There are far more tribes than sects. Occasionally, a tribe can unite the Frost Province and become the Great Chanyu, but they've never formed a true country. Li Qingshan had a deep impression of the tribes of bone-eating shamans. They were called ancient, or primitive and savage. The boundary between humans and daimons was extremely blurry. Perhaps humans were even more demonic than daimons at times. In short, everything was based on strength, and the strong were revered. Accepting a wolf as the Great Chanyu was a matter of course. It really is a world of wolves. The reason why this place has become a forbidden zone probably has something to do with the wolf god. Not bad. Do you feel a little sleepy? Jiyu Yangying suddenly asked. Sleepy? Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to be sleepy. However, after hearing what Jiyu Yangying said, he suddenly remembered something. He actually felt a little bit of it. It was like the lingering laziness of a summer afternoon. As far as the eye could see, it was a vast expanse of whiteness. The scenery was nothing special. He suddenly exclaimed in surprise. He opened his mouth and blew hard. The wind and snow flew back. Rolling up the thick layer of snow, it was actually densely packed bones that filled the entire valley. Li Qingshan was no longer the kid he used to be. Such a scene was nothing to him. He asked doubtfully, did he kill them because he was sleepy? All living beings that enter this valley will be seized by uncontrollable drowsiness and fall into a deep slumber, never to wake up again. Of course, what killed them wasn't sleepiness, but hunger, thirst, and cold. The deeper we go, the more tired we feel. Even with our cultivation, it's hard to resist. Even the Demon King can't resist sleepiness. How interesting. Li Qingshan had imagined that the forbidden area would either be filled with traps or poisonous insects and ferocious beasts. He did not expect it to be a place that could make people sleep. Thinking about it, the traps were no match for the school of Moism. The poisonous insects and ferocious beasts were no match for the demons. He had seen many of these, but it was still far from being a forbidden area. What kind of power is causing this? Any kind of power must have its source. If he could find the source of such a powerful power and further control it, it would be amazing. That's why I'm here. Jiyu Yangying ignored the piles of bones under her feet and stared into the depths of the valley. She had already investigated it. This power was definitely not the cause of the formation. There must be something here, and it was most likely not a living being. Otherwise, it would be able to constantly release such a powerful and mysterious power. What she needed to do was to control this power, make the winged man king fall into a deep slumber, and then pluck that feather. This is one of your goals? Yeah. Just treat it as helping me out. Jiyu Yangying smiled easily. Then how are you going to resist this sleepiness? Through the scorching wind hell. Pain always clears people up. I came here once before I underwent the third heavenly tribulation. My original plan was just to test it out, but I never thought the sleepiness would accumulate so quickly. I almost died here. Fortunately, the scorching wind flared up at a fixed time, which was why I survived. Is it really that powerful? Why don't I try it? We'll split what we get. Li Qingshan was rather eager. All right, we'll split what we get. However, the most dangerous part of the forbidden area isn't in the valley, but outside. Wolves hide thousands of kilometers. Li Qingshan remembered the words he had heard when he first joined the Hawkwolf Guard. As the Lord of the Frost Province, even if the Wolf King could not obtain the mysterious power of the forbidden area, he would never allow anyone else to touch it. The reason why Jiyu Yangying could retreat last time was not just because of the scorching wind of hell, but also because she was the daughter of the Hawk God. If it were anyone else, they probably would have died to the wolves as soon as they emerged from the valley. Then why didn't you let me kill the wolf demon? It's the same. The Wolf King will discover it sooner, and once they start fighting, it'll be a battle to the death. It's probably his sons and grandsons. All right then. I'll keep watch for you here. You can go. Jiyu Yangying sucked in a deep breath. Scorching wind rose up from her body, turning the snow into rain. She gradually rose up, connecting with the scorching wind hell as much as she could, absorbing the tempest of hell into her body. The scorching wind rushed over, and Li Qingshan experienced bone-deep pain. He frowned as well. This was only the aftermath. Standing at the center, the pain Jiyu Yangying endured went without saying. However, within the twisted air, there was only comprehension on her face. As a matter of fact, she even smiled strangely. What a deviant woman, Li Qingshan muttered. What did you say? Jiyu Yangying suddenly opened her eyes. Nothing. If my Uncle Wolf comes, what are you going to do? I'll ask him to buy me a drink. Li Qingshan shrugged. Shuangzhou's liquor is famous. Jiyu Yangying hesitated. If I fall asleep, pull me back. Li Qingshan was a little surprised. He gave her a deep look and said with a smile, Don't worry. Jiyu Yangying slowly flew to the depths of the valley so that she could get used to the drowsiness. However, the drowsiness was getting stronger and stronger without any evil intention. It was as if she had returned to the time when she was very young and could easily fall asleep. A half-human, half-bird figure appeared in her mind. It was not as elegant and noble as the winged man. It had an eagle's beak on its face, and its hands were crooked claws. Its body was covered with grey feathers, but it still looked like a human. Its voice was also sharp and hoarse. Monster was the most accurate evaluation of it. Father, they all called me a monster. Chapter 1153. What did you say? I'm your daughter. Is there something wrong with your brain? You pervert, cold-blooded. The monster pounced on it and scratched. Actually, I have the ability to turn you into a human. The eagle stood still. Really? The monster's eyes were full of hope. But why should I do that? The eagle stared into the distance. I. The monster could also shed tears. If you want to be a human, then go cultivate. If you want to hate me, then hate me, just like how you hate them, that's your freedom. The eagle finally looked at her. Go to hell, I'm not your daughter. The monster waved its wings and fell from the cliff with an ugly posture. That's also your freedom. The pair of cold golden eagle eyes seemed to be looking down at her from above. She suddenly felt a little more awake. Freedom was a terrible thing. That was the deepest feeling she had back then. The young eagle fell off the cliff. It could fly freely or fall freely. She often wavered between these two feelings. She couldn't tell whether she had broken through the clouds and flown to a high altitude, or whether she was about to fall to the ground and be smashed into pieces. Or maybe both feelings were real. As she cultivated day by day, she became stronger and faster, but also closer to death. Drowsiness came and became more and more violent. The hellish hot wind was blowing, and her body and soul felt like they were about to be blown into ashes. The two complicated feelings alternated, and drowsiness gradually took over. Take a rest. What's the point of persisting like this? There's only pain and suffering when you're awake. A voice as thin as a gossamer floated in the surging hot wind. It was her own voice. Unknowingly, she had already crossed the last limit and reached a deeper part of the valley. Li Qingshan activated the mystic light illuminates all and locked on Jiyu Yangying's figure. Seeing that drowsiness on her face was getting more and more obvious, he suddenly howled to the sky. His howl reached Jiyu Yangying's ears. She was slightly shocked and became more awake. She continued to move forward. Suddenly, a wolf howl was heard in the vast snowfield. It was mournful and full of heroic spirit. It was definitely not inferior to Li Qingshan's howl. The first time I heard it, it was thousands of miles away. He arrived outside the valley. Li Qingshan looked back and saw a burly man walking out of the wind and snow. He had a green stubble on his face and thick snow-white fur on his shoulders. The whites of his dark brown eyes flashed with a faint green light. Wolf King. Li Qingshan? Haha, I didn't expect my name to spread so far. Li Qingshan laughed. Your Excellency's great name. I heard about it a long time ago. The battle at the Ink Sea had already shocked the entire world, and the Skyfrost Wolf King, who was also one of the 10 demon monarchs, was quite moved. The Dragon King of the Sea's strength was unquestionable, but he had actually lost to a junior who had cultivated for less than 100 years in his own territory. But no matter what, power was worthy of respect. Same here. Li Qingshan cupped his hands and said, I have prepared a banquet in the Chanyu golden tent. Let my niece come out. Don't accidentally fall asleep in the snow. You'll freeze to death. The Wolf King walked toward the valley. What's the point of holding a banquet in a tent? Why don't we use the mountain as our beam and the sky as our tent? Just the two of us can drink together. Li Qingshan blocked the Wolf King's path, showing no intentions of backing down. Their gazes met, and in a flash, the tigers and wolves were fighting. Then I'll see how far she can go this time. If Jiyu Yangying couldn't get that item, it would be a futile fight. I heard that the liquor in the Shuang province is pretty good. Li Qingshan glanced at the wine pouch on the Wolf King's waist. The Wolf King didn't say anything. He untied the wine pouch and tossed it to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan also took out a wine gourd and tossed it to the Wolf King. The liquor entered his throat, and it felt like fire and knives, as if the world of ice and snow had turned into a sea of magma. He drank half of the wine in the wine pouch in one gulp. Li Qingshan spat out a mouthful of hot alcohol. Good wine. The Wolf King frowned, feeling a little pained. His wine pouch was much bigger than it looked. It wasn't easy to brew the spirit wine stored in it. Li Qingshan drank at least 500 kilograms in one go. If an ordinary demon king dared to drink like this, they would definitely be drunk. Li Qingshan, on the other hand, seemed radiant and in high spirits. Banyan Tree King? The Wolf King opened the wine gourd and smelled the Banyan Tree King's aura. The spirit chi in it was so dense that even he was tempted. It also contained a trace of the mystical laws of heaven and earth. Li Qingshan's wine was brewed using the sap of the Banyan Tree King's trunk and the power of the gods. It was even more precious than the Wolf King's wine. Oh right, do you have a wine cup? Li Qingshan suddenly asked. You use wine cups? Actually, I only use one, the kind with 3 legs. It seems like it's forged from bronze, but it's actually not. It's a complete set of 9. Li Qingshan gestured with his hands and suddenly said, you should have one here too. The Wolf King's face gradually sank. He took out an item from his bosom. Is this the wine cup you want? In his hand was a tiny, three-legged cauldron, engraved with the landscape of the Frost Province. It was whiter than the Mist Province cauldron, as if it had been dyed with a layer of frost. It was the Frost Province cauldron. That's right, that's it. Li Qingshan extended his hand and grabbed it. It was icy cold. How bold of you, sir. How dare you use 9 cauldrons as a cup? The Wolf King gripped it firmly. This isn't of much use to me, but it's very suitable as a wine cup. Li Qingshan tried using force, but the Frost Province cauldron did not budge at all. He understood that it was not just the Wolf King's power, but also the weight of the cauldron itself. The two powers combined definitely could not shake it easily. A place of bitter cold like this isn't suitable for banyan trees to grow. The Wolf King smiled viciously. The layer of frost that covered the Frost Province cauldron spread along Li Qingshan's hand towards his body, enveloping him completely in the blink of an eye. Ignorant brat, so be it if I don't do anything, but you're actually trying to take it. You're asking for it. I think this place just happens to be in need of some greenery. Li Qingshan smiled proudly. The ground beneath his feet cracked, and he slowly pulled the Frost Province cauldron over. His smiling face had already turned into an ox's head, immediately making him seem simple and honest. The Wolf King felt an irresistible, copious force. He could not help but change in expression. Just how heavy was the Frost Province cauldron? Under his control, it was even heavier than a mountain. Just how much physical strength did this bastard possess? He wanted to pull the Frost Province cauldron back, but the cauldron seemed to be sucked into Li Qingshan's hand. Li Qingshan's skin had also turned into a green ox hide to resist the invasion of the frost. His feet sank deep into the ground as energy continuously poured into his body. He thought, hey, foolish old wolf. It's fine if you let me take a look, but you actually dared to let me take it. I really don't want it anymore. You brat, let go. The Wolf King squeezed out these words from between his teeth. Since you've heard of my name, then have you heard of, what? Chapter 1154. The moment the Shuang Province cauldron left his hand, the Wolf King still had a look of disbelief. He had actually been robbed in Shuang Province. And it was an open robbery. And it was the Shuang Province cauldron. Motherfucker! The Wolf King's face protruded and his fur grew. He revealed his wolf form and pounced at Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan was pushed backward and his back slammed into the rock wall. With a loud rumble, half of White Elephant Mountain collapsed and scattered. Rubble shot through the air for hundreds of miles. Li Qingshan lay in the pile of rocks and shook his huge bull head. Behind him, in the smoke and dust, a giant wolf was staring at him fiercely. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth, and it was about to bite him. Li Qingshan suddenly raised his hand and made a pause gesture. Then, he held the trembling Shuang Province cauldron in one hand and raised the wine bag with the other. He poured the wine into the cauldron and drank it in one gulp. He pursed his lips. It doesn't seem special. The furious howl of the wolf resounded through the icy plains, but then, an ox demon rose from the ground and sent the huge wolf flying. The demon wolf that reported the news squatted on a snowy mountain several hundred li away and looked at the two huge figures fighting in the blizzard. This time, the king was afraid of trouble and met a fierce character. You, how dare you? The Wolf King growled and the blizzard became even fiercer. Thank you, this is nothing. Li Qingshan rubbed his head and laughed. Die for me. The Wolf King spat out a mouthful of icy breath. Come, come, come. I'll fight you with one hand. Li Qingshan grabbed the Shuang Province cauldron on his back with one hand and beckoned the Wolf King with the other. Then, he was frozen by the frosty breath and froze in this provocative posture. The Wolf King bit at Li Qingshan's throat. Each of its teeth glowed with a black luster. This was his most destructive innate divine ability, Kiss of Death. It could penetrate the enemy's body and directly bite their divine soul. No matter how strong their defense or vitality was, they would still lose a layer of skin if they were bitten. Bang! Li Qingshan shattered the ice on his body, but he was too late. Seeing that he couldn't avoid it, he grinned. The Wolf King suddenly felt his body lighten. His determined bite missed its target. Just as he was about to adjust his posture, Li Qingshan opened his hand and an invisible force grabbed him, speeding him towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan raised the Frost Prefecture cauldron. It smashed into the Wolf King's head. Boom! The Wolf King was sent flying and felt dizzy. If not for the fact that he was the master of the Frost Prefecture cauldron, his brain would have been in danger of bursting out. He was both shocked and furious. He had already forgotten how many years it had been since he had suffered such a great loss. Li Qingshan glanced at the hand holding the cauldron. He suddenly thought of something and said, "I'm sorry, your position just now was really too straight. I really couldn't help it. However, you seem to be much weaker than the Dragon King of the Sea." There were still many dangers in the battle at Mohai, and this Wolf King didn't pose any threat to him at all. He had thought that the other party had an innate divine ability, so he was prepared to be extra serious. But he had forgotten. The Dragon King of the Sea could only threaten him by relying on the Mohai left behind by the 5 Absolutes Immortal. Apart from 1,000 years into painting, all his other moves were useless. If not for his immortal body, he might really be slaughtered by the Dragon King. Not having an innate divine ability was the Dragon King's biggest weakness, but his overall strength was no weaker than the other 10 Monster Kings. The fact that Li Qingshan could defeat the Dragon King in the Mohai without even using a Phoenix Nirvana was already proof. His strength had already surpassed the 10 Monster Kings. It wasn't that the Wolf King was too weak, but that he was too strong. "You bastard!" The Wolf King gritted his teeth and turned back into his human form. He waved a large black flag with the totem of a running wolf on it. It pointed to the sky and the boundless snowy clouds. Suddenly, a star lit up. This wolf totem was the supreme faith of Shuang Province, gathering the faith power of billions of people. The object of their faith was naturally not the Skyfrost Wolf King, but the legendary greedy wolf. The people of Shuang Province claimed to be the descendants of the Wolf King, and the Wolf King was the ruler of Shuang Province. It has something to do with this. The wolf totem was the Skyfrost Wolf King's most powerful trump card, and it could summon the voracious wolf star to destroy its enemies. Now that it had unleashed it, it was clearly filled with killing intent. The ravenous wolf star flashed and spat out a wisp of starlight. It seemed as if it was falling from the distant heavens, but in the blink of an eye, it pierced through the clouds and snow. Before the starlight descended, Li Qingshan sensed great danger. Although his skull was hard and his scalp was tough, he probably could not withstand this starlight. He rolled on the ground and turned into a spirit turtle. On one side, he pressed the Frost Prefecture cauldron firmly, while on the other, he used the turtle shell to reflect the starlight back. Of course, it was not a direct reflection. He also got the spirit turtle to check and adjust the angle of the turtle shell slightly. As a result, just as the Wolf King waved the wolf totem, he felt a pain in his abdomen. He looked down in shock and saw that his abdomen had been pierced through by the starlight. The wound was still sparkling with starlight. He covered his abdomen and half knelt on the ground. This move was just too fast and too powerful. Even he could not react in time. He hurriedly covered the wound on his abdomen with the wolf totem and absorbed the specks of starlight. Fortunately, he was the owner of the wolf totem, or he would probably be heavily injured. Li Qingshan did not take advantage of the opportunity to attack. Instead, he suppressed and refined the Frost Prefecture cauldron with all his might. At this moment, an ancient dragon-like head poked out from the turtle shell and laughed loudly. "Ha ha ha, idiot. Get the hell out here. Get the hell out here." The Wolf King was completely enraged. He charged forward without any regard and beat up the spirit turtle violently. Li Qingshan shrank back in the turtle shell and continued to refine the Frost Prefecture cauldron as he laughed. "Idiot, idiot, idiot." The thunderous booms reached Jiyu Yangying's ears, but they seemed to come from an extremely distant place. She was doing everything she could to resist the nameless drowsiness. Even the hellish torture was beginning to become less intense. This was not a good sign. However, this drowsiness was the best guide. She had to find its core. The Wolf King's sharp claws and fangs clearly could not do anything to the spirit turtle. The kiss of death bit down viciously on the turtle shell, but it did not achieve the effect of biting the enemy's soul. Instead, it felt like its control over the Frost Prefecture cauldron was growing weaker and weaker. It was extremely furious, but it just could not vent it. Suddenly, it turned around and looked at Jiyu Yangying. A vicious light flashed through its eyes. "I'd advise you not to seek death. If you don't leave now, it'll be difficult to leave later." Li Qingshan's drawn-out voice came from the turtle shell, but it made the Wolf King feel a deep chill. Li Qingshan's strength had far exceeded its expectations, and his abilities were innumerable. If it continued, it would be a fight to the death. Under the gaze of the wolf's eyes, Jiyu Yangying's heart shivered. She woke up from the edge of a deep slumber. "It's here." Ignoring the Wolf King's threat, she took out a space-splitting bird feather and slashed at the space in front of her. The space split open. An extremely ordinary-looking, multicolored bug was sealed in a completely transparent gem. It formed an existence similar to amber, slumbering quietly in the space. It really is. Chapter 1155. The Wolf King suddenly turned around and pushed off with the tip of his foot, turning into a blur and rushing off. As long as he could obtain this item, all the humiliation he had suffered this time could be considered repaid. "Don't even think about leaving." Li Qingshan leapt up. Originally, he planned on catching up, but he suddenly thought of something. He slowed down and advanced slowly. The multicolored bug lurking in the air released invisible ripples that were closest to Jiyu Yangying. Even the whistling hell of hot wind calmed down. The Wolf King suddenly could not help but yawn. Sleepiness suddenly flooded over him like a tide. He thought, "Oh no, I've charged too hard." The power of this bug was far greater than he had imagined it to be. The Forbidden Zone had never been suitable for rapidly venturing in, but after Jiyu Yangying cut through space and revealed the origin of power in the Forbidden Zone, the multicolored insect, the power it released became even more powerful. With a thump, the Wolf King fell out of the air and fell into a deep slumber. Li Qingshan took advantage of the time the Wolf King lost consciousness to completely suppress and refine the Frost Province cauldron. He watched as the ripped space gradually closed up. He extended his hand and pulled out the amber with an invisible force. As the bug approached him, he also felt an uncontrollable sense of sleepiness. Together with the intoxication from the strong alcohol, his body immediately swayed slightly. This bug really is wondrous, but if it didn't have this effect, how would I deal with the King of Feathermen? He controlled the distance between him and the little worm as he slowly approached the Wolf King's side. First, he removed the wolf totem and stuffed it into his robes. Then, he removed the wolf fang necklace around the Wolf King's neck. The largest wolf fang in the middle was a strange-looking Sumeru ring. After doing all that, he raised his hand and drew his end's frenzied blade. He wanted to eliminate the source of trouble once and for all. What is this place? The frenzied blade soul also fell asleep. However, the Wolf King shivered. His face twisted as if he was doing his best to break free from his dreams. Li Qingshan thought about it and stowed the blade away again. It was not that he had suddenly become merciful and recalled the various teachings of the unraging monk. However, it would be very difficult to kill the Wolf King with this strike. On the contrary, it would agitate the Wolf King and cause him to awaken. If it really came down to the point of exploding one's monster core and perishing together, it would be meaningless. Thus, he threw the little worm into the Azura field, and it immediately felt its mind clear. Without waiting for the Wolf King to wake up, he flashed to Jiyu Yangying's side, picked her up, spread his wings, and soared into the sky. A moment later, a hysterical wolf howl resounded across the icy plain. Li Qingshan, you and I are absolutely irreconcilable. Li Qingshan chuckled and didn't take it seriously at all. The spirit turtle's profound shell formed a sphere beside him, completely concealing their auras as it hovered extremely high in the sky. Jiyu Yangying remained asleep in his arms. After all, she was nowhere close to the Skyfrost Wolf King's strength, and the scorching wind hell had sapped her of all her strength, so she was in a rare state of weakness. That familiar face had once captivated him. He could not help but extend his hand now. Right when his fingertips were about to touch her face, he suddenly clenched his fist and smiled self-deprecatingly. Is it because you can't bear to, Or because you can't accept this? As a result, he stopped moving. He just sat there with his legs crossed, letting her lie in his arms quietly. The sky was so blue that it was almost transparent. The white clouds rose and fell silently. Jiyu Yangying slept quietly. In a daze, she had returned to the lonely cliff. She was finally no longer a monster, and she had made everyone who dared to call her that pay the price. She felt rather complacent. Then, she recalled everything that had happened in the past few years. Regardless of whether she admitted it or not, this identity had helped her tremendously. Now, she had finally become strong enough. She was confident that she could forgive and forgive. Could she imagine that he was doing it for her own good? As a result, she stood before him once again. Actually, from the moment you were born, I already had the ability to turn you into a human form. A single sentence from him had crushed all of her defenses. This was the last thing she wanted to think about. Wasn't this something insignificant to him? Then just what had he persisted through all these years for? She smiled with difficulty. If this is for me to train, isn't it a little too cruel? Test. That's not the case. The resources you have received are not love or help. The pain you have suffered is not training or a test. All of this is your fate, your choice. It has nothing to do with me. The only thing I have given you is freedom. I hope you will like it. Father, do you hate me? Because No. That cold answer woke her up from her deep sleep. She looked into Li Qingshan's pitch-black eyes and asked with a smile, "How was your sleep?" "How long did I sleep?" Jiyu Yangying pressed down on his knees and propped herself up. She rubbed the space between her eyebrows. The night sky was filled with stars. "Not long," Li Qingshan said. Their faces were inches apart, but her calm demeanor did not tolerate the slightest bit. "Did you get what you wanted?" Jiyu Yangying got up and stretched. "Of course." Li Qingshan took out the Azura field. "There's no time to lose. Let's go." Jiyu Yangying had already determined the direction and was about to fly to the city amongst the clouds. "Wait." Li Qingshan pulled her sleeve. "This thing doesn't distinguish between friend and foe. Once it is taken out, you and I will be affected as well. How do you plan to use it?" "We'll pay a visit to the King of Winged Men and ask for your son. He will definitely let us into the city amongst the clouds. He might even hold a banquet to invite us. You can take out the bug secretly and break the amber on the outside to release its power completely. Then we'll all fall asleep. Is there no way to refine it? Speaking of which, what is this little bug? It doesn't look like a monster. It's really strange. This is a sleeping bug. It's not a real insect. It's a kind of magical technique. It's the condensation of a powerful force. With our level, it's impossible for us to control it. So, we can only use the dumbest method. Sleepy bug." Although Li Qingshan's ability to accept things had already become much stronger after witnessing the lingering effects of the feather with Jiyu Yangying, he still could not help but feel amazed as soon as he thought about how the infamous forbidden grounds of the 9 provinces actually originated from a single technique. He even erased his arrogance. The city amongst the clouds is the home ground of the winged men. What makes you think that the King of Winged Men will fall asleep before us? He's an old man. Old men are always sleepy. Jiyu Yangying gave her reason after thinking about it. Li Qingshan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Why do I hear that the older one gets, the less sleep they get? Is that so?" Jiyu Yangying was a little surprised. She said resolutely, "Then we can only take a gamble." "Hey, don't you think you're too anxious?" Li Qingshan frowned. He felt that Jiyu Yangying was too eager for quick success. "This matter concerns your son's life. If we're late, he might be refined into a pill by the King of Winged Men. Aren't you anxious at all?" Jiyu Yangying asked. Chapter 1156. As expected, you're not that gentle. Jiyu Yangying understood. "Commander Jiyu, you should think about your own matters. Don't pretend to care about other people's lives," Li Qingshan said unhappily. "Fine, I admit that. However, we've tricked the Wolf King this time. We can't hide the fact that we've obtained the sleepy worm for too long. If the Feather King finds out and prepares in advance, all our previous efforts will be in vain. Jiyu Yangying still insisted. I'll ask the Banyan Tree King for advice. It won't take long. The sleepy worm isn't something that should exist in this world. Even the Banyan Tree King won't have any good countermeasures. Even if he does, it won't be something that can be prepared in a short time. It'll be a waste of time. That's not necessarily true. The two of them engaged in a war of words, neither giving way to the other. Under the blue sky and above the white clouds, it was still calm and tranquil, but the atmosphere had become somewhat tense. Li Qingshan pursed his lips, showing his unswerving determination. He had dominated for decades and had long been accustomed to acting alone. He had his own set of principles. When it was time to advance, he would rather die than retreat. When it was time to retreat, he would not linger to fight. He was not someone who would change his mind easily. Fine, fine. Jiyu Yangying sighed. Just when Li Qingshan thought she was going to give up on the argument, she suddenly widened her eagle eyes and stared straight at Li Qingshan. Then I'm not begging you right now. Instead, I want you to fulfill your promise from the past and return my favor. Do you agree or not? You. Li Qingshan was a little surprised. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. You're not talking about friendship by saying that. Yes, I'm talking about friendship. Jiyu Yangying said decisively. Li Qingshan closed his eyes and opened them again. He opened his eyes again. All right, I agree. Thank you. Jiyu Yangying looked apologetic. Li Qingshan snorted coldly and didn't look at her. Jiyu Yangying smiled helplessly and immediately restrained herself. Let's go. Before he had finished speaking, Li Qingshan had already soared into the sky and left. Jiyu Yangying shook her head and followed closely behind him, flying in the direction of the city amongst the clouds. City amongst the clouds. The morning sun shone into the spacious hall. Li Fengyuan was lying on the ground, snoring loudly. Unable to think of a way out, he simply drank to his heart's content at the banquet, and then slept until now. Featherman King Bai Chen was sitting on a throne not far away, slowly sipping his wine cup. He studied Li Fengyuan carefully. I admire his guts. He was still able to sleep in such a situation. Get up. Bai Jie stepped forward and kicked Li Fengyuan. It's daybreak. Li Fengyuan stretched and looked out the window. What do you think? Are you satisfied with the banquet? The Feather King drained the wine in his cup. He asked with a smile. Not bad. Li Fengyuan said indifferently, but he was secretly complaining. This hall was like a huge cage to him. No matter how polite the Feather King pretended to be, he couldn't escape this knife. Now, I also have a small request. I hope you won't refuse. The Feather King toyed with the empty wine cup. Friend, please tell me. I can help as long as it's within my power. Li Fengyuan knew that if he didn't cooperate now, the Feather King would really fall out with him, so he simply agreed. That's great. I only need a drop of your blood. The Feather King raised his right hand, and a pure white ray of light snaked out toward Li Fengyuan like a long snake. Li Fengyuan swallowed and resisted the urge to dodge. He looked on helplessly as the white ray arrived in front of him, pierced his fingertip, and drew out a drop of phoenix blood. The bright red phoenix blood glowed with a fiery light. It followed the white ray back to the Feather King and directly entered his body. The Feather King closed his eyes, and his whole body glowed with a red light. His face showed extreme joy. This pure and hot life force was a fatal temptation to him, who was on the verge of death. He almost couldn't resist sucking all of Li Fengyuan's phoenix blood dry. He took a deep breath to overcome this impulse. This matter couldn't be rushed. The white ray of light in his eyes retracted, and Li Fengyuan finally relaxed. Just now, he was ready to die together with the Feather King, but he knew that in this situation, it wouldn't be so easy even if he wanted to die. He was really in a situation where he couldn't die and could only be trampled on. This deep sense of helplessness caused an unprecedented anger to surge in his heart. He couldn't help but clench his fists. Your Majesty, how do you feel? Bai Jie asked with concern. Good, very good, very good. The Feather King opened his eyes. His face was rosy and glowing, and he said good 3 times. As the legend said, phoenix blood could increase one's lifespan. What made him even more excited was that the pale blue feather was also trembling slightly, and it felt like it was fusing with his bloodline. Although this feather had unimaginable power and seemed to have an inheritance, he couldn't control this power well, let alone inherit it. Because the Feather King wasn't a real feather race, he wasn't recognized by this feather. No matter how he tried, he could only use a small part of the feather's power. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to worry about his lifespan. As the king of all birds, the phoenix had an innate affinity with all the feather race. What he felt now confirmed his initial speculation. This feather was extremely close to the phoenix bloodline. If he could successfully exchange blood, he would have the phoenix bloodline, and it wouldn't just be prolonging his lifespan. Thinking of this, he clenched his fists and crushed the white jade wine cup into powder. His face was full of smiles. "Bring the wine," Li Fenghua shouted, interrupting the Feather King's imagination. "Impudent." Bai Jie stepped forward and raised her hand to teach him a lesson. "Stop," the Feather King ordered. "Your Majesty, give him the wine. Give him the best wine. Go and get a Cloud Mother pill." Cloud Mother pill. Bai Jie was surprised. The Cloud Mother pill was condensed from the essence of the clouds. It wasn't easy to refine, and it was considered the best pill of the feather race. Even among the feather race, only a few could use it. "Go. Just deduct it from my quota. I know what I'm doing," the Feather King said to Li Fengyuan amiably. "Don't be angry. I'll compensate you for your loss. Not everything can be made up with elixirs," Li Fengyuan said angrily. The phoenix was being raised like a pig. No, it was even worse than a pig. A pig only needed to be stabbed once, and its flesh wouldn't have to be cut every day. The humiliation was indescribable. "I understand how you feel, but unfortunately, this is all I can do. Isn't the word longevity what cultivators seek?" The Feather King let out a sigh, as if he had no other choice. However, he had made up his mind to never let Li Fengyuan leave the city amongst the clouds. No one knew how far the divine bird phoenix would grow, and the only way to eliminate this threat was to kill him. He glanced back at the pale green feather. When he mastered the power within it, he would kill Li Qingshan as well. Then, he would destroy the great Xia dynasty and let the true gods rule this world again. The feather race would naturally be the supreme ruler. Everything was going according to plan. At this moment, a thunderous roar came from the sky. "Where's the king of winged men?" Chapter 1157. Amidst the roar, the cloud mountains surrounding the city amongst the clouds suddenly scattered like smoke, as if a typhoon had passed through. A wave of demonic aura soared into the sky, instantly enveloping the entire cloud city. The clear blue sky seemed to be dyed with a layer of dark red. The winged men were horrified and looked in the direction of the voice. "Who are you? How dare you behave atrociously in the city amongst the cloud?" More than 10 rays of white light soared up from within the city. They were all experts of the winged clan who had undergone 3 heavenly tribulations. Their auras converged to form a sea of light that charged towards the dark red sky. However, in a short period of time, they were actually unable to break through the surging demonic aura. They were all greatly shocked that there were actually such powerful experts in this world. "Li Qingshan, it's you." Bai Jie frowned and looked at the pair of red eyes in the sky. It was different from the lazy drunken state of that day. At this time, it came with anger. It really had a momentum that could swallow the mountains and rivers, which made her secretly shocked. If it wasn't for the city amongst the clouds behind him and the winged king in the city to rely on, he would have had the urge to turn around and flee. Slut. When Li Qingshan saw that it was her, he became even more furious and dared to open his right hand. Bai Jie suddenly felt an invisible force grabbing her, and her body involuntarily flew toward him. She couldn't help but be overwhelmed with shock. White light surged from her body as she flapped her pure white wings to resist. At the same time, she drew her bow and shot an arrow. The arrow turned into a surging pillar of light that whistled through the sky. So he is Li Qingshan, he really lives up to his reputation. However, No matter how strong you are only one person. How dare you come to my city amongst the clouds and behave atrociously? You are truly reckless." With this thought in mind, the winged men attacked at the same time. The winged humans prided themselves on being elegant. They did not like nor were they good at close combat. Whenever they attacked, streaks of white light would appear. Not only was this technique swift and fierce to the extreme, it also had the power to destroy mountains and sever rivers. It was as if heavenly punishment had descended upon the world, instantly drowning Li Qingshan. "Eldest father!" Li Fengyuan cried out in surprise and wanted to fly up, but a white light wrapped around his neck, making him unable to move. "What are you thinking?" the Feather Human King asked. "My old man is here, you're finish." Li Fengyuan shouted. "Oh!" The King of Feather Men didn't think much of it. "Do you know what happened to the Dragon King of the Sea? This is not the Ink Sea. Very good, since he took the initiative to deliver himself to me, I will not let him go. This will save me a lot of trouble." "Hey!" The Winged Man King suddenly looked surprised. Within the surging light, Li Qingshan did not budge at all. Pieces of the spirit turtle's profound shell rose up as he used his innate ability, final reflection of the setting sun, reflecting all of the attacks. He did not just reflect them back, but he also adjusted the angle of the attacks subtly. He gathered the light into a beam and blasted it at Bai Jie. Bai Jie's eyes were filled with light. Her mouth was slightly opened, and an unprecedented fear shrouded her heart. This light beam had gathered the full power of all the winged human powerhouses. He would definitely be annihilated within, with no chance of survival. In that moment, the various rumors regarding Li Qingshan flashed through his head again. From the destruction of Fire Melt Mountain to the Ink Sea dragon slaying, perhaps provoking him was not the right choice. "You want to force me to leave the city amongst the clouds? Okay. Let's go see your big father." The shock on the Feather Human King's face faded, and he regained his composure. He flapped his wings gently, and the dark green feathers trembled slightly, ripping through space. Before Li Fengyuan could even respond, he had already arrived outside the city amongst the clouds. Surging white light filled his eyes. Li Qingshan's expression changed. He never expected Li Fengyuan to suddenly appear. It was already too late for him to stop now. "Your Majesty." Bai Jie looked at the familiar figure blocking her way and was overjoyed. The Feather Human King looked back and nodded slightly. He flapped his wings again, and the attack that could annihilate mountains was completely swallowed into the ripped space, as if it had never existed. Li Qingshan eased up slightly and became even more vigilant. Just like Jiyu Yangying had said, the Feather Human King was anything but trivial. With his appearance, even the unstoppable force field of the earth was cut off. The Feather Human King was just standing there, but he seemed to be in another world. This was definitely not something that he could do normally. At this moment, Jiyu Yangying arrived behind him. Seeing this, she secretly gave him a thumbs up. Drawing the Feather Human King and the other Feather Human powerhouses out of the city amongst the clouds would undoubtedly greatly increase their chances of winning this battle. Although he was somewhat unhappy, he was still calm and strategizing in actual combat. He made people feel at ease and was an excellent partner to work with. He decided not to say what he wanted to say, as he naturally knew what to do. "Eldest father," Li Fengyuan called out. He felt warmth in his heart, and couldn't help but think of the nursery rhyme that Li Qingshan sang to him. "In the world, only the father is good. A child without a father is like a blade of grass. Don't be afraid. I'm coming to save you now," Li Qingshan said gently. He then looked at the Feather Human King and asked, "Are you Bai Chen?" "That's right. Why did you come to my city amongst the clouds to create trouble?" The Feather Human King retorted. "Cut the crap. Let him go," Li Qingshan said. "This is an important guest that I invited. How can I let him go just like that?" The Feather Human King said with a smile. Li Fengyuan wanted to refute, but the light thread around his neck suddenly tightened. "What an important guess." Li Qingshan laughed coldly. "I've also been invited to the city amongst the clouds. Am I also an important guest?" "Of course." The Feather Human King clapped his hands and said with a smile, Why don't we gather in the city amongst the clouds? I'll immediately order someone to prepare a banquet to welcome you and this friend beside you. You know me? Jiyu Yangying asked curiously. Although she had some fame, she had only undergone 3 heavenly tribulations recently. She admitted that she wasn't worthy of the Feather Human King's attention. You're the daughter of the Eagle God, the new star of the feather race. How can I not know you? I see. Jiyu Yangying's gaze flickered when she saw the dark green feather on the Feather Human King's back. She immediately understood. The Feather Human King had a mystical treasure on him. He was guarding against the feather race from all over the world, so he was always paying attention to the potential enemies. Among all the feather race's monster kings, not to mention her father, he was definitely the greatest threat among all the enemies. Li Qingshan muttered to himself for a moment. He looked as if he was afraid of harming the innocent. In the end, he nodded and said, "All right. I've long heard of the city amongst the clouds. Let's see what kind of dangerous place it is. Please." The Feather Human King raised his hand gracefully. Li Qingshan strode forward, and Jiyu Yangying followed closely behind him. Both of them were tense. This wasn't just an act. Whether they could win this battle depended on whether they could display their sleepiness. The distance between them and the Feather Human King was extremely important. At the same time, this performance was also to lower the Feather Human King's guard. If he was too relaxed, he would be on his guard. The Feather Human King frowned slightly. As Li Qingshan approached, he felt an indescribable sense of danger. He felt that Yang Ling was advancing like a ferocious tiger that was about to pounce on its prey. The experts of the Feather Human King also gathered around and formed a battle formation. They immediately suppressed Li Qingshan's demonic energy. However, their expressions weren't very good. Just now, when they attacked together, Bai Jie had almost died. This was a great setback. The Feather Human King was relieved. The battle formation had been formed. No matter how strong Li Qingshan was, he was just a tiger in a cage. As for Jiyu Yangying, who was beside him, her power was limited. It seemed that she was already trying her best to endure. When they arrived at the city amongst the clouds, it would be impossible for them to escape even if they wanted to. At the thought of this, he suddenly felt somewhat sorrowful. He was the dignified Feather Human King. He had the rock's feathers and a hostage, yet he was so afraid of a junior. This was simply a joke. He felt that it wasn't just his body that was aging. There was also his spirit. This Li Qingshan wasn't even 100 years old. He was really young and enviably young. However, it was the time when one was young and full of vigor. It wouldn't be strange if he died. Jiyu Yangying trembled slightly. Suddenly, she extended her hand. She suddenly reached out her hand and held Li Qingshan's hand. Li Qingshan had thought that she was being suppressed by the aura of the Feather Human King. However, he felt a soul-piercing pain. She immediately understood. She had already started to activate the Hellfire Hot Wind to prepare for her attack. In the eyes of the Feather Human King, she was seeking his help. However, she was actually sharing some clarity with him. "Fellow Jiyu, what's wrong?" The Feather Human King seemed to have sensed something and suddenly asked. "Nothing. It's just an old problem," Jiyu Yangying said with difficulty. Her lips were already dry and scorched. Her skin had turned yellow. Her entire aura was weakening. Only her pair of eagle eyes were bright and full of vigor. Could it be the school of legalism's Naraka scripture transformation? "You're probably cultivating the Hellfire Hot Wind," the Feather Human King said. "Your Majesty is indeed knowledgeable. You even know this," Jiyu Yangying praised. "Rumor has it that cultivating this technique requires one to frequently experience the pain of hell. Fellow Gu's willpower is truly astonishing." The Feather Human King smiled reservedly. However, he couldn't imagine that this kind of masochistic technique could pose any threat to him. Just the Hellfire Hot Wind alone couldn't even harm a single hair on his head. Meanwhile, Jiyu Yangying definitely wouldn't share even the slightest bit of clarity with him. She sighed and said, "In life, one has to suffer a bit. Just bear with it for now." At this time, Li Qingshan had already arrived within 10 steps of the Feather Human King. Some people are always asking for it. He suddenly took out the amber with the sleepy worm sealed in it. He lightly flicked it. The amber flew out and shattered in mid-air. However, the sleepy worm disappeared without a trace. "What are you doing?" Bai Jie shouted. Li Qingshan was taken aback. This thing can't be that much of a scam, right? But soon afterwards, endless fatigue spread out like an invisible spiderweb, sticking to every single feather human. Even the feather humans in the city amongst the clouds were affected, collapsing to the ground. At the very center of the spiderweb was the feather human king, Li Qingshan, Jiyu Yangying, and Li Fengyuan. Li Fengyuan immediately fell into a deep slumber. The feather human king knelt down on one knee. He wanted to close his eyes, but they did not. He questioned powerlessly, "What did you do?" "Fuck you." Li Qingshan cursed. His eyelids constantly twitched, and his body swayed. He felt like all of his demon chi was no longer under his control. Even if he wanted to move his fingers, he would struggle to do so. All he could do was use the spirit turtle's method of chi suppression and do his best to maintain a clear mind. It was not that the sleepy worm was ineffective. Instead, it was unimaginably effective. Just like what Jiyu Yangying had said, it was not a true insect. It was just a technique that had been left behind on the Frost Province. When it was continuously released, it could form a forbidden region, stopping the Skyfrost Wolf King in its tracks. Now that Li Qingshan had shattered it, it was equivalent to unleashing all of its power at once. At this moment, Li Qingshan no longer had the time to think about what kind of person had cast this technique. Instead, he was worried about whether Jiyu Yangying could endure it or not. Bai Jie and the other powerful feather humans had already fallen into a deep slumber. They all fell out of the sky, vanishing into the rolling sea of clouds in the blink of an eye. Jiyu Yangying's strength was impressive, but she definitely could not compare to Li Qingshan and the feather human king. Her cultivation was nowhere close to theirs. Even they were immobilized right now, let alone her. When he turned around, Jiyu Yangying had already let go of his hand and was walking toward the feather human king. The stunning face that had once made Li Qingshan fall in love with her at first sight was now so haggard that it was almost terrifying. The surging hot wind that surrounded her body had sucked away all the moisture in her skin. Her skin was quickly carbonized and blackened, as if it was about to combust. This woman. Li Qingshan blinked his eyes forcefully. He suddenly understood why she had taken Qian Rongji as her disciple. Jiyu Yangying tiptoed in the air as she walked forward step by step. She was like a toddler learning how to walk. Every step was extremely difficult, and she had to use all of her willpower and determination to do so. She recklessly gathered the hot wind and mercilessly threw herself into the hell. Her internal organs were all on fire, and her soul was as good as extinguished. With a boom, her long hair was set ablaze. Her carbonized skin cracked, and faint flames could be seen from the cracks. She was already severely injured before she could even attack. She was on the brink of despair. If this continued, she would die here in no time. She had only taken 3 steps out of the 10 steps between her and the feather human king. This is too embarrassing. Li Qingshan sighed. She was now like a chicken that had its feathers removed and thrown into the oven. Then, she was forgotten by the chef and was slowly being roasted. She no longer had the heroic bearing of an eagle. However, she was also like a phoenix bathing in fire. The 4th step. Don't come any closer. Stop right there, the feather human king ordered. There was a hint of panic in her voice. Jiyu Yangying took another step forward. She had to reach the feather human king and pluck that feather before the power of the sleepy worm disappeared and before she was burned to death by the hot wind. Otherwise, if the feather human king attacked, Li Qingshan might be able to escape, but she would definitely die. However, when she took the 7th step, she could no longer take it. Pain and exhaustion alternated, and finally, they seemed to merge into one. The voice in the dark spoke again. "I'm so tired. I'm so tired. What's the point of living in such pain? Why don't you just die like this? Then you can have a good sleep and no longer feel any pain." The feather human king was already very close. She could reach out and touch him, but she was also very far away. At this moment, Li Qingshan moved. His posture was also very embarrassing. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was rolling and crawling. "You're right. The old guy likes to sleep more. Go." As he said this, he pushed Jiyu Yangying's back hard. She threw herself at the Feather Human King. The Feather Human King tried his best to dodge. She grabbed his lapel tightly and tried to pluck that feather. However, she did not dare to touch the Feather Human King's body. It was not because she was afraid that men and women should not touch each other, but because she was worried that the hot wind of hell would make the Feather Human King sober. Li Qingshan went up to assist as well, but the three of them were slow, sluggish, and heavy. The clash between the peak experts of the 9 provinces actually ended up like a fight between children. As a matter of fact, it seemed even worse. It left him at a loss as to how to react. However, the danger hidden in it was no less than any battle that Li Qingshan had experienced. Time passed, but in fact, it was only for a moment. Li Qingshan felt that the stagnant demonic qi was beginning to relax a little. He knew that the power of the sleepy worm was disappearing. The instantaneous explosion also meant a rapid decline. If the Feather Human King was allowed to recover, this battle would be a lost one, and he would have to sacrifice Jiyu Yangying for nothing. Thinking of this, he raised his arms and locked them around the Feather Human King's neck. He said in a deep voice, "Pull it out." Chapter 1158. The moment she touched the green feather, Jiyu Yangying felt an unprecedented sense of emptiness. It was as if she had been thrown out of the 9 heavens and everything in the world became insignificant. Even the unbearable hellish torture became insignificant. At this moment, she was absolutely sure that this was what she wanted. Suddenly, a hand tightly gripped her wrist. The strength was so great that it almost crushed her wrist bones. The King of Winged Men no longer had any elegance and calmness on his face. He stared at Jiyu Yangying fiercely with a trace of pain on his face. It was because he had physical contact with Jiyu Yangying that he was affected by the hellish heat wind and regained consciousness faster. He squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth, "Don't even think about it. Let go. You don't deserve to have such a thing." Jiyu Yangying's voice was hoarse as she gripped the green feather tightly. The pain of her broken bones was nothing compared to the difficulty of this journey. "I don't deserve it. Even your father doesn't dare to say that. He's just a half-demon." The King of Winged Men's expression became more sober, but the white spirit light was still flowing sluggishly. Although the hellish heat wind made him sober, he clearly wasn't used to this kind of pain. "He doesn't deserve it either." Jiyu Yangying's arrogance soared to the sky. "Arrogant? You, even though you're weak and on the verge of death, you still don't dare to fight and ascend. He's just a dog raised by others. No matter how hard he struggles, he can't erase the mark of the past. All he has is power. He might be able to dominate the 9 provinces, but that's all there is to it." Jiyu Yangying seemed to be smiling, but her expression was ferocious and full of incomparable pleasure. Li Qingshan was also surprised. He didn't expect that under her easygoing appearance, there was such arrogance hidden. She didn't even put his own father in her eyes. However, this was more to his liking. "Well said, I'll give you a hand." He suddenly closed his arms and strangled the King of Winged Men's words. However, it was blocked by a faint layer of white light, so it wouldn't be fatal for a while. However, their sleepiness was fading away, and their auras were rising at almost the same time. Li Qingshan's advantage in strength in close combat was becoming more and more obvious. His innate supernatural power was also gradually recovering as he worked hard to activate the power of vibration. Although its power was still very weak, it was enough to disintegrate the faint light on the Winged Man King's body. For a moment, the bones all over the Feather Human King's body cracked and shattered, and he resisted with all his might. Demonic qi and spiritual qi collided. The resulting storm swept away the clouds, revealing the vast land of the Cloud Province. More than 10 beams of white light soared into the sky like white rainbows piercing through the sun. Bai Jie was furious. After she fell asleep, she kept falling until she crashed heavily on the ground. Although she didn't die from the fall, however, he had also suffered some injuries. What was even more embarrassing was that he was covered in dirt, breaking the rule that his feet should not touch the ground. However, it was precisely because he had landed on the ground that he was out of the range of the sleepy bug that he was able to wake up so quickly. The Feather Human King joined hands, wanting nothing more than to tear Li Qingshan into pieces. Li Qingshan frowned, not because of these Feather Human King, he wouldn't be afraid even if there were 10 of them, but because the pale green feather was trembling slightly. Once the Feather Human King's power recovered enough to activate this feather, all his previous efforts would be in vain. However, it was almost impossible to kill him when both of their powers had not fully recovered. No matter how old and weak he was, his foundation was still at the peak of the third heavenly tribulation. Core. Jiyu Yangying suddenly opened her mouth and let out a strange sharp cry, like the mournful cry of a crow. It was filled with ominous omens. However, Li Qingshan felt that it was extremely familiar, and he immediately recalled Death Haste Curse. One of Mo Yu's innate supernatural powers was almost a curse that could directly reduce the enemy's lifespan. Back then, he was cursed to lose 100 years of his lifespan, and the curse was only removed after he killed Mo Yu. However, from the beginning to the end, it didn't affect him much. He was very young, and he had all kinds of godfiend bloodlines, so his lifespan was immeasurable. However, when it was used on the weakened Feather Human King, it was a terrifying fatal blow. In an instant, as if time had accelerated, wrinkles quickly covered the Feather Human King's handsome face, and his body also emitted a strange smell. It was the stench of someone who was about to die. Wisps of white light scattered around his body, like dancing electric snakes, and disappeared in the void. His aura became increasingly weak. This was the spiritual energy that he had taken from this world, and now he was returning it to this world. Even a celestial would have 5 decays. In the face of death, the high and mighty cultivators were also like ants. Jiyu Yangying took the opportunity to pull out the pale green feather from her full wings, leaving only a wisp of white light. So this is her final trump card. Li Qingshan raised his thick eyebrows. Just like the talisman scrolls of human cultivators, it wasn't rare for the demon race to condense their innate supernatural powers into a spell. Mo Yu would definitely cooperate with her. You dare! The Feather Human King was shocked and angry, and his voice was old and desperate. I will die with you. Do you have the guts? Jiyu Yangying said disdainfully, provoking him with words instead. With Li Qingshan here, the Feather Human King's self-destruction would be futile, and it would save them a lot of trouble. I will definitely not die. The Feather Human King's eyes, ears, mouth, and nose emitted rays of white light, and then thousands of pure white light rays passed through Li Qingshan and Jiyu Yangying, wrapping around Li Fengyuan's body. In an instant, all the light rays were dyed blood red. In order to maintain his life, he used all his strength to extract the phoenix blood, and the spiritual energy stopped dissipating. The wrinkles stopped spreading, and an unnatural redness appeared on his old face. Li Fengyuan's realm wasn't high enough, so he was still in a deep sleep. However, his face suddenly turned pale, and his aura rapidly weakened. He frowned as if he was in a nightmare. You're courting death. Li Qingshan was furious. He used the tiger demon's fury and cut off all the white light rays with his fingers like a knife. Then, he smashed the Feather Human King's head with a punch and opened his bloody mouth, revealing a mouth full of sharp teeth. His head had already turned into a tiger's head, and he bit the Feather Human King's wing and tore it. With a rip, half of the wing was torn off, and blood splattered everywhere. Jiyu Yangying also tore apart the white light and pulled out the pale green feather. However, before she could rejoice, the pale green feather trembled violently and glowed with the same color as the sky. It became indistinct, as if it was about to float away from this world. Ha 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 ha, if I can't get it, then neither can you. The Feather Human King condensed his head from the light rays and laughed wildly, but his laughter was filled with desperation. In the end, he couldn't refine this pale green feather and inherit its power and inheritance, which was why someone had used such a method to take it away. However, he still had it for a long time, so he used the last bit of connection to cast this feather out of the land of the 9 prefectures. Jiyu Yangying's expression changed. She had planned and risked her life, but it was all for naught. With Bai Jie as the leader, the Feather Human Masters formed a battle formation and surrounded him. Let go. Li Qingshan said. No. Jiyu Yangying had a determined expression. She no longer needed to control the hot wind to maintain her consciousness. Her ravaged face gradually recovered, and her expression softened. Qingshan, you should go. Our grudge is over. I want to make another bet. Li Qingshan made up his mind and grasped Jiyu Yangying's hand tightly. He activated the power of vibration with all his might in an attempt to suppress the pale green feather. However, he sensed a vast emptiness similar to Jiyu Yangying's, and it wasn't something he could suppress. With a buzzing sound, the pale green feather emitted a sound that defied hearing and shook the void. Then, it streaked across the void and disappeared with Li Qingshan and Jiyu Yangying. First Father. Li Fengyuan woke up from his sleep and saw this scene. He couldn't help but be furious. Your Majesty. Bai Jie said with concern. The feather human king's body started to emit spiritual energy again. You're courting death. The feather human king said, but he didn't feel happy at all. Not only did he lose the pale green feather in this battle, but he also used up the last of his lifespan. His life could be in danger at any time. At this moment, a crane's cry resounded through the clouds. A white crane as large as a mountain streaked across the sky and flew toward the city amongst the clouds. It was one of the 10 demon kings, the Shadow Cloud Crane King. Old man, you're too late, too late. The thing you wanted is gone, and it won't come back, the feather human king said with his last breath. The white crane turned into a skinny old man with a red crown and a crane cloak. He looked at the feather human king, who had lost his head and half of his wings, in shock. He didn't believe that there was someone in this world who could injure him to such an extent and take away the feather that he yearned for day and night. He was one of the few great demon kings among the feather race. He had long coveted the pale green feather, but he didn't have the chance. He didn't expect someone to beat him to it. Feeling the lingering sleepiness in the void, he suddenly understood. Did they borrow the power of the forbidden land in the north? He frowned and asked, who did it? Li Qingshan and Jiyu Yangying, the feather human king didn't hide anything and said the 2 names while gnashing his teeth. It's them. The Shadow Cloud Crane King was shocked. He had heard of these 2 names before, especially Li Qingshan. The Ink Sea Dragon Slayer had shocked the world, but he didn't want to give up. The 2 of them weren't pure feather race. Couldn't the pale green feather choose a suitable owner? Where are they now? I don't know where they died, the feather human king said. It wasn't easy to leave the protection of the world and travel in the void. It was almost impossible to survive. Even if they survived, they couldn't return to the 9 provinces. The Shadow Cloud Crane King wasn't surprised. How could he not pay a price for challenging the feather human king? It was already shocking enough that he could do this. Nonsense, my big old man won't die. He'll come back and beat your dog head up. Li Fengyuan's eyes were filled with tears as he pounced at the feather human king. Shut up. The feather human king grabbed Li Fengyuan's neck angrily until he returned to his original form. Phoenix. The Shadow Cloud Crane King was shocked again. He had heard about the appearance of phoenixes in the Green State, but he had never seen one. He couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity and respect, confirming his judgment. He said seriously, this is the leader of the feather race. Please let him go. The leader of the feather race? I ate the leader of the feather race. Chapter 1159. Under the big banyan tree. The leaves rustled in the wind. Little Anne's long hair fluttered in the wind. He suddenly meditated in silence, the light and shadow mottled on his white robe. She suddenly opened her eyes and stood up, looking around blankly. She felt empty in her heart, as if she had lost something extremely important. Without thinking too much, she whispered, Qingshan? The only reply she got was the sound of water splashing. You. The Shadowed Cloud Crane King was shocked and furious at the same time. This was equivalent to slapping him in the face, treating him, a great demon king, as if he was nothing. The Feather People surrounded the Feather People King. They spread their wings and formed clouds that covered the sky. They stared at him coldly. Behind them was the majestic and beautiful city amongst the clouds. Bai Jie said, Does the Crane King want to break the 1,000-year peace and start a war with the city amongst the clouds? The Shadow Cloud Crane King knew that although it had some prestige in the cloud state, it preferred to live in seclusion. It was not the king of demons like the Banyan Tree King. It would be difficult for him to fight against the Winged Man clan outside of the city amongst the clouds by himself. Moreover, he did not know the divine phoenix at all, so there was really no need for him to stand out. He could not help but say resentfully, "The phoenix is a divine bird blessed by the heavens, born with the 5 virtues. You have committed so many unjust acts, you will definitely suffer the wrath of the heavens. He is a divine bird, and we are also divine beings. It's a pity that phoenixes are already extinct. Otherwise, we would eat a few of them and extend our lifespans." A male winged person said proudly, causing everyone to laugh in agreement. The Shadowed Cloud Crane King's expression changed as a few phoenix feathers fell before his eyes. He caught them with a wave of his sleeve. On the neck of the Feather Human King, there was a white light wriggling, as if it was chewing and digesting, or like a phoenix struggling with all its might. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Unwilling to continue watching, he flicked his sleeves and left. Baijie smiled faintly. This was the might of the winged human race. Even the 10 demon kings of a province had to admit defeat in front of them. She then turned around and asked, "Your Majesty, are you all right?" There was no answer, only the wriggling of the white light. Li Fengyuan was swallowed by the white light, but in front of him was an unprecedented deep darkness. Deep pain engulfed him. It was as if thousands of needles had pierced deep into his body. The white light seemed to have substance as it squeezed and cut his feathers, flesh, and bones into pieces. They were then swallowed and digested. He was born with a tenacious vitality. It was as if he wanted to experience this despair more clearly. All the pride and tenacity had become weak. He could not help but ask for help. "Eldest father, it hurts. Save me." But there was no response. The pain grew deeper and deeper, coming from his heart. "Big old father is no longer here. In order to save me." His spirit began to shatter, leaving behind only a remnant of his consciousness. "Don't tell me, this is it." At the last moment, a loud voice boomed in his heart. No, that was not his voice, but the phoenix's never-ending belief, Li Qingshan's will to fight without ceasing, his innate inheritance. Therefore, the moment he was about to be killed, he burned up all of his vitality and entered death. The Featherman King's body no longer emitted spirit light. Devouring phoenixes was indeed very beneficial to his lifespan. He could clearly feel the blazing phoenix blood flowing through his body. It was filled with endless vitality, and it had gotten rid of the meaning of death. It gave him a great sense of pleasure. Suddenly, all the vitality was extinguished, like the embers left behind by a flame. The white light condensed into a head again. It was still old and on the verge of death. It had lost the vitality brought by the phoenix blood, and there was a hint of fear on its face. The thing he was most worried about had happened. Phoenixes were not that easily digested. That was why he had chosen to suck blood slowly in the beginning. However, the situation was too urgent, and he had no other choice. He had planned to slowly eliminate the hidden danger in the future, but he did not expect this to happen. Just as he was filled with anxiety, he realized that the spirit light was no longer dissipating. He was slightly relieved. Looks like it worked after all. It extended my lifespan. However, he soon realized that something was wrong. Although the spirit light was no longer dissipating, it had started to condense in his body. The pure, almost transparent white spirit light was like a round pearl. Suddenly, an orange flame was ignited in it. Rumble. A peal of thunder rumbled across the horizon. Suddenly, a strand of dark cloud appeared in the azure sky. It spiraled and grew, spreading rapidly. "This is..." The Shadow Cloud Crane King suddenly turned around. The Feathermen looked up. Baijie's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the Shadow Cloud Crane King was right? Killing a phoenix would bring about divine punishment. She had never heard of such a thing. "Your Majesty, are you all right? Divine tribulation?" The Featherman King looked at the sky with a hint of confusion on his face. He reacted quickly and used all his strength to extinguish the flame in his body. However, it was like trying to put out a fire. Pure white spirit light surged in wildly, fueling the rise of the flame. The tribulation cloud spread rapidly in the sky. The thunder grew louder. The Featherman King felt that his aura was locked. Although he was surrounded by the Feather Men, and the Shadow Cloud Crane King, one of the 10 Demon Kings, did not dare to offend him, he suddenly felt that he was alone in this world. Divine tribulation could succeed or fail, but it could never be escaped. This was the divine tribulation. The dark tribulation clouds shrouded the sky, and they were still expanding and spreading. Ascension, heavenly tribulation. The Featherman King is ascending now? No, it's 3 heavenly tribulations. The Shadow Cloud Crane King's heart skipped a beat. He thought that the Featherman King was ascending. However, he soon realized that there were no ripples in the domain, and the color and quality of the tribulation lightning were not right. However, in terms of scale, the Ascension heavenly tribulation was probably nothing. The pressure it produced was so overwhelming that even he, who was far away, could feel the pressure. He still did not understand. What was going on? It was not the Featherman King who was ascending. Why was the aura locked on him, and with such great momentum? Could it be, Your Majesty, what is going on? Baijie asked in shock. The Featherman King's face flushed and paled. He spat out 2 words with difficulty, Nirvana. The Phoenix's nirvana, rebirth from the ashes, was the prelude. There was great terror in going from life to death. Nirvana was like extinction, even more horrifying than normal death. At the last moment, Li Fengyuan chose nirvana, letting everything return to silence, and then igniting a new flame. It was called rebirth. This was naturally something that Baijie had never seen before. Nirvana. The Shadow Cloud Crane King first exclaimed, then laughed loudly. I told you there would be divine retribution. This is the cycle of karma and retribution. Actually, no one present would have guessed that the Phoenix's nirvana was a legend in the 9 states. The original Phoenix's nirvana was not an innate magical power, but an innate ability of the Phoenix. Li Qingshan's Phoenix bloodline was not complete. Moreover, it was a mixture of multiple bloodlines, and it was not pure enough, which was why it became a magical power. It was repeated and superimposed. He sacrificed all other abilities to strengthen the Phoenix's most powerful ability to the extreme. And at this moment, as the only Phoenix in this world, it was showing its true nirvana. I did it. In that bit of flame. His new consciousness was filled with surprise. This was his first nirvana in his life. Comparing it with the knowledge of the Phoenix inheritance, he immediately realized that the current situation was a bit strange. He did not turn into a new Phoenix. Instead, he merged with the Featherman King. Like conjoined twins, neither could get rid of the other. This was the result of the Featherman King's all-out devouring, and also the special effect of the Phoenix's nirvana. However, this was not a stable state. One of the two must completely devour the other. Li Fengyuan's consciousness had just awakened from silence, and he was immediately suppressed by the Featherman King, not daring to use his spiritual power. The two of them were basically one. Your power was my power, and they could only use divine thoughts to determine the winner. Even so, the Featherman King had an absolute advantage. Whether it was experience or power, there was no possibility of failure. Once he succeeded, he would have the Phoenix bloodline, and lifespan would no longer be a problem. The sky suddenly lit up. Boom! A bolt of tribulation thunder struck the Featherman King like a shocking dragon, and he only managed to stabilize himself after falling for almost 1,000 feet. Such great power! The Shadow Cloud Crane King was secretly shocked. Your Majesty! The Featherman King exclaimed in surprise, and stepped forward to help block it. That bolt of lightning was like the first drop of rain before a storm, and it poured down violently. All of you, step back. The Featherman King only had time to say one sentence before he was drowned by the lightning. The Featherman King was also affected, and the lightning flickered and jumped on their bodies like chains. They had all gone through 3 heavenly tribulations, and were not afraid of the bombardment of the tribulation thunder, let alone being affected. That was why they dared to stay here. However, The power of this heavenly tribulation was beyond imagination, and it made their bodies numb and difficult to bear. And their auras made the tribulation clouds swell even more. Let's go. Seeing that the situation was not right, Baijie took the lead and retreated to the city amongst the clouds with a flash of lightning. The lightning was blocked by a translucent light screen, and the tribulation thunder only caused a few ripples on it, showing the powerful defense of the city amongst the clouds' great formation. However, her expression suddenly changed. Oh no, move the city amongst the clouds quickly. The tribulation clouds had already spread over, and their shadows covered the white palace. The feather men in the city woke up one after another, and they saw this scene, but they did not realize what had happened. Arcs of lightning bounced and jumped on the white light screen, and the ripples became denser and denser. The powerhouses of the feather men also reacted, and their expressions changed. It will be terrible if we are involved in the heavenly tribulation, but only your majesty can move the city amongst the clouds. Let's push the city away. After making up their minds in a few words, they all flew down and pushed the city amongst the clouds against the lightning. The city amongst the clouds moved slowly, and escaped the shroud of the tribulation clouds. Baijie heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, with their strength, they could even move a mountain away if they worked together. Otherwise, if the city amongst the clouds was involved in the heavenly tribulation, it would be really troublesome. Bang! The pure white palace shook, and the city amongst the clouds suddenly stopped moving. Something is blocking it. Damn it, it's that old crane. On the other side of the city amongst the clouds, the shadow cloud crane king waved his large sleeves, and raised one hand to block the city amongst the clouds. His crane cloak fluttered in the wind, and his eyes flashed with an ominous glint. As a dignified monster king of the 10 directions, how could he allow himself to be bullied so easily? Since he was so shameless, then he would turn against him. Use your full strength, Baijie shouted, and the feather men exerted their strength together. Chapter 1160. Black clouds pressed down on the city, and wind and thunder roared. The shadow cloud crane king spread its wings, which were almost able to envelop the entire city amongst the clouds, creating gusts of strong wind. Although the feathered beasts weren't known for their strength, they were able to resist the city amongst the clouds by relying on their tendons and bones that had been honed for thousands of years. Baijie looked back and saw a sea of lightning. The king of feather men was nowhere to be seen. Since the ruler of the city amongst the clouds was not here, there was no one else who had the authority to control the great formation of the city amongst the clouds. As such, all kinds of offensive methods could not be used. Otherwise, the old crane would definitely be defeated. Moreover, their auras caused the tribulation cloud to continue expanding and stretch out a few hundred kilometers, causing the sea of lightning to become even more violent. The rumbling and flashes of lightning didn't stop, and it seemed as if the heavens were enraged and wanted to destroy everything. The electric arcs interweaved around her body, and the pressure on her increased. The thunderbolts bombarding the city amongst the clouds increased in number and density. No matter how sturdy the great formation was, it could not compete with the heavens. There was no limit to the power of the heavenly tribulation. If this went on, neither they nor the city amongst the clouds would be able to hold on. Bai Ling, follow me. Baijie called out and went straight for the shadow cloud crane king. At the same time, her mind raced and she didn't dare to threaten him anymore. Shadow cloud crane king, we have no enmity with you. Why must you become enemies with us for a phoenix that you've never met? The shadow cloud crane king snorted coldly. I'm afraid it's too late to admit defeat now. The winged human tribe will definitely not forget today's grudge. Baijie gritted her teeth and shot an arrow. The arrow turned into a rain of arrows in mid-air, dragging thousands of light threads. Beware of my sword, demon. White Sun was enraged, brandishing 100-jong-long light sword, whistling as it slashed down. Bai Ling threw out a white halo. It expanded rapidly towards the shadowed cloud crane king. Crane soaring the 9 heavens. The shadowed cloud crane king stretched out its neck and sang loudly, its voice sharp and resounding, like silk ripping. For a moment it drowned out the thunder. The rain of arrows, the sword of light, and the circle of light were all twisted and shattered. Baijie frowned. This old demon was indeed not easy to deal with. Everyone, continue to attack. The safety of the winged human tribe is in our hands. As he spoke, he kept plucking the bowstring. Radiant light burst forth from the feather men's bodies. In order to protect their homeland and their clansmen, they gave it their all, disregarding injuries. As the saying went, 10,000 men can't stop one man if he goes all out. Moreover, there were more than 10 winged person powerhouses who had gone through 3 heavenly tribulations. The interweaving white light was like a giant hand pushing the city amongst the clouds forward slowly, away from the area covered by the tribulation clouds. The shadow cloud crane king had to split his attention to deal with by Jie and the other two's harassment, so he could not suppress it. Instead, some of its feathers had withered. However, he was unwilling to give up just like that. Countless cultivators on the ground looked up at this shocking scene. They discussed among themselves. Just who is crossing the tribulation? It has such power. It seems to be the Feathermen King, but how did he provoke the Crane King? Crane King is elegant and indifferent. It must be the rudeness of these birdmen that made the old man fly into a rage. But he seems to be at a disadvantage. Sigh, these winged people have the advantage in numbers after all. Even the Shia kingdom can't do anything to them, let alone the Shadow Cloud Crane King. Hey, what's that? It's the king. On the eastern horizon, a colorful cloud silently glided across the sky, dragging a long tail behind it. An old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion stood on the colorful cloud. He had a 3-foot-long beard, wore a green crown, and wore a cloud pattern robe. He asked in surprise, "Old he, what are you doing?" "King of Donglu." Bai Jie's heart skipped a beat. Rumor had it that the Shadow Cloud Crane King was close to the King of Dongyi, often drinking tea and discussing Dao together. If he also made an enemy of the winged people, it would be one disaster after another. The Shadow Cloud Crane King's words proved that the rumor was true. He said joyfully, "Little Yoon, you came at the right time. The winged people are bullying me. Come and help me." Bai Jie hurriedly said, "King of Donglu, this has nothing to do with you, don't you dare." Preposterous. Hearing the Shadow Cloud Crane King's words, the King of Donglu flew into a rage. He took out a small 3-legged cauldron and smashed it towards the city amongst the clouds. The rumors were not accurate. Not only were they close, but they were also close friends. When the King of Donglu was young, he roamed the East Sea on a crane. That was a friendship that had been forged for thousands of years. The small cauldron grew with the wind and became the size of a mountain. On its surface were patterns of clouds and stars, as well as the mountains and plants of Yunju. It was one of the 9 cauldrons, the Cloud State Cauldron. Boom! The advance of the city amongst the clouds came to a sudden halt. The King of Donglu held the incantation with both hands and chanted silently. Colorful clouds rose beneath his feet and pressed down on the city amongst the clouds. Only then did he send a telepathic message to the Shadow Cloud Crane King. "Luckily I heard the commotion and rushed over. What happened? Why are you angry with these winged people? Who is going through the heavenly tribulation? It doesn't look like the heavenly tribulation of ascension, but the commotion." The Shadow Cloud Crane King explained the cause and effect as well as his own speculations. "I see, there's actually such a thing. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with you?" The King of Donglu asked curiously. The old he knew would not make such a big fuss over a single sentence, let alone drag his friends down with him. "It has nothing to do with me, it has to do with you," the Shadow Cloud Crane King said. The King of Donglu glanced at the horizon again and nodded in understanding. This is indeed an opportunity. How could one allow others to sleep beside one's bed? That was why the ancient King of Southern Yu conquered the Merfolk and left behind the King of Yu's remaining stratagem. Furthermore, the threat of the winged people was far greater than that of the Merfolk and Merfolk. Not to mention the daily struggle for resources, the power they had been accumulating for thousands of years was like a sword hanging above their heads. Once the time was ripe, the King of Donglu's residents would most likely be the first to suffer. Every generation of the kings of Donglu wanted to deal with this great threat, but they did not have the ability to do so. Bai Chenggang has just lost that feather. We can't let him devour the phoenix. He has long coveted the Cloud Province. Now that the world is in chaos and the Great Shia is no longer as powerful as before, he will definitely make a move. Before we ascend, we have to deal with this problem for the younger generation, lest they become slaves again, the Shadow Cloud Crane King said. That's exactly what I was thinking. Wait for me to summon the White Dragon King and flatten this city amongst the cloud. The King of Donglu waved his sleeves and a decree flew out, summoning all the officials. The Cloud Province Demon Kings and Human Kings worked together to suppress the city amongst the clouds once again, preventing it from advancing. At this moment, the Tribulation Cloud had already enveloped everything within its range of attack, and it became even more ferocious. In terms of scale, even the Golden Cicada Spirit King's heavenly tribulation for ascension could not compare to this. The winged people experts were gradually unable to hold on. Not only could they not advance further into the city amongst the clouds, but they were also pushed back several miles. The great city guarding formation was bombarded by the lightning. The white screen of light also dimmed slightly, and the buildings in the city began to tremble slightly. The King of Donglu was secretly speechless. There was a limit to one's strength. If not for the might of the heavenly tribulation, even if all the great cultivators in the Cloud Province were used up, they would not have been able to break through the city amongst the clouds. This won't do. If this continues, we will all fall, a winged people expert shouted. We can still escape, but what about the people in the city? Once the great formation is broken, it will be the disaster of the entire race. How can this be? How can this be? Bai Jie also felt despair. Could it be that the heavens really blessed the divine bird? Killing it was inauspicious. Chapter 1161. Bai Jie flew over the Sea of Thunder. White feathers scattered in the air. As far as the eye could see, a brilliant phoenix wing had grown out of the King of Feather Human King's broken left wing. His body was flowing with light and fire at the same time. His face kept changing, sometimes twisted and ferocious, and sometimes angry and hateful. Give up. You can never defeat me, the Feather Human King said. I'm not going to defeat you, I'm going to kill you, you bastard. Li Fengyuan roared. It was as if a person had been split into two halves and was engaged in a life and death struggle while resisting the heavenly tribulation. However, the King of Feather Men was the one who bore the brunt of the tribulation thunder. This was because the heavenly tribulation's descent was almost entirely triggered by his powerful aura. Rings of light, which were like endless waves, collided with the tribulation thunder and cancelled it out. After all, he was a super expert at the peak of the third heavenly tribulation. Although the heavenly tribulation this time was extremely powerful and affected a lot of people, it was still a third heavenly tribulation in essence. Your Majesty, if this goes on, the city amongst the clouds won't be able to hold on, and all the winged people will die. Bai Jie shouted, but it was unknown whether her voice could reach the Feather Human King's ears amidst the deafening thunder. The Feather Human King seemed to sense something. He suddenly turned around, and the ferocious expression on his face froze. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. This is for the sake of all winged people. Bai Jie took out an exquisite and beautiful crystal dagger. Spiritual light swirled around it. Impressively, it was also a powerful treasure. It was specially used for close combat, and it was a defensive item bestowed to her by the Feather Human King in the past. She clenched her teeth, stepped forward, and stabbed at the King of Winged Human King's chest. The King of Feather Men was startled and closed his eyes. His body trembled. Just as the dagger was about to pierce through his skin, a hand gripped the sharp edge tightly. Bai Jie raised her head in astonishment. Could it be that Li Fengyuan turned from guest to host? The King of Feather Men suddenly opened his eyes. His left eye was fiery red, and his right eye was azure blue. Both of them revealed the same will. No, I still want to live. Two faces and two voices overlapped, both filled with the desire to live. At this moment, they reached an agreement. Then, he raised his hand and grabbed Bai Jie's neck. Your Majesty. You are the Winged Human King. Bai Jie's eyes widened in disbelief, and she couldn't help but recall the past. I once had the opportunity to ascend, but at that time, Great Shia had just been established, and it was a constant threat to the city amongst the clouds. I am the king of the winged people. Sacrifices must be made. That was why he stayed behind and waited for a new opportunity. I didn't expect that I would wait for 1,000 years and miss all the opportunities. Sigh. At that time, he sighed. His body seemed to be glowing. He had always been the genius, the hero, and the king of the winged human tribe. No matter what kind of halo he had, it wouldn't be excessive. He had never disappointed anyone, but unexpectedly, now that he thought about it, there seemed to be a hint of bitterness at the corner of his mouth. Was there regret in his heart? Yes, he regretted it. The young man didn't fear death because he didn't understand how terrifying it was. As his lifespan slowly came to an end, his body and soul deteriorated day by day. It was like a giant hole that swallowed all joy, and nothing could fill it. If mortals could use fate to comfort themselves and obtain a psychological balance, he couldn't. If I had chosen to ascend at that time, I would have already embarked on a new journey in the heavenly Tao. This thought continued to linger, but it only increased the pain. Now, he finally saw an opportunity to make up for his regret and start all over again. No matter what, he couldn't let go. I'm sorry. This time, I want to live for myself. Go. The winged human king slowly released his hand. Although he was a little ashamed, he was full of determination. He would devour the phoenix and obtain the new life that he dreamed of. Then, he would ascend to the heavenly Tao. Everything in this world would have nothing to do with him. Your Majesty. Bai Jie felt that the power of the tribulation thunder was getting stronger and stronger. If she stayed any longer, she would be in danger of dying. She looked back at the sky full of wind and thunder. How long could the city amongst the clouds last? The dagger in her hand fell. She suddenly spread her wings and arms, and a hazy white light appeared all over her body. The light replaced her torso and limbs, and a white human figure blurred. What are you going to do? The winged human king was shocked. Your Majesty, you taught me to sacrifice. How could you forget it? But you've done enough for the winged human tribe. Now, it's my turn. Bai Jie's face was calm. Suddenly, a bright light burst out. A white sun rose in the sky. Wherever the light shone, the rolling thunder was pushed away. The world became quiet. Bai Jie. The winged human king cried out in alarm. The winged human king's wings were broken, and he was on the verge of collapse. The flesh on his front was almost completely peeled off, and the spark in his chest was exposed. The shock and anger on his face faded, and a trace of confusion appeared. Looking into the distance, the city guarding formation was already on the verge of collapse. Streaks of light flew over from the horizon, and they were all the officials of the king of Donglu's mansion. After a short period of silence, the thunder roared again. The battle between light and fire also stopped. Although light was far superior to fire and had the upper hand, it was difficult to extinguish the spark so easily. Bai Chen was silent for a moment, and suddenly said, Li Fengyuan, if we continue to fight, we will definitely perish together. As he spoke, he actually recovered his usual elegance. Then let's perish together. Although he wanted to live, he was not afraid of death. After Nirvana, Li Fengyuan had a deeper understanding of the way of life and death. Suddenly, he felt that the strong will that was firmly suppressing him had retreated. Life is better than death, isn't it? Bai Chen muttered to himself, I have a request. If you are willing to agree, I will not fight with you anymore. You will obtain my power, and you will be able to calmly pass the heavenly tribulation. What request? Protect the city amongst the clouds for me. What did you say? Li Fengyuan was surprised. I will bear all the sins, and they have never harmed you. As the flame swayed, Li Fengyuan recalled what he had seen and heard when he was wandering in the city. The white fountain under the sunlight, the beautiful music reverberating in the air, the Featherman children laughing and playing with him in groups, the gentle scolding of their mothers. At that time, he was full of worries and did not take these scenes to heart. But at this moment, they suddenly became clear, and the thunder seemed ethereal. You are playing tricks again. Still want to shake me? These are all real. Everything is worth it. Bai Chen seemed to be talking to Li Fengyuan, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Under the continuous bombardment of lightning, Bai Chen's will faded, and the flame quickly rose. Wait, I haven't promised you yet. Li Fengyuan restrained the rising flame. Please protect them, I beg you. Aren't you afraid that I will go back on my word? You are a benevolent phoenix. Humph, if it were my first father, he would definitely not agree to you. Even if I agreed, I was just fooling you. Thank you. Bai Chen said sincerely. Finally, he opened his palm. There was a pure white feather in it, and he wanted to murmur something. Flame spewed out of his body. It instantly swallowed his body. The white feather drifted. In the raging flame, the wings spread again, and they were already glorious phoenix wings. With a resounding phoenix cry, the phoenix rushed against the lightning and flew into the depths of the tribulation clouds. He actually succeeded. The Shadow Cloud Crane King was surprised. He had originally planned to break through the city amongst the clouds and then deal with the King of Feathermen, but he did not expect the phoenix to successfully counterattack. He has helped us eliminate a great disaster. The White Dragon King will be here soon, and then he will definitely break through the city, King Donglu said. What about the Feathermen in the city? It will be best if they die in the tribulation lightning. The talent of the mutants was really terrifying, far surpassing that of ordinary humans and demons. The Feathermen were even more outstanding among them. They must eliminate any future troubles, and slaughter the city and destroy the country. The experts of the Feathermen had already given up on pushing the city amongst the clouds, and were fighting with the officials of the King of Donglu's mansion. Their power was interlinked, and they formed a formation, forming a geometric pattern of interweaving light in the sky. However, with the Shadow Cloud Crane King and the King of Donglu holding the line, defeat was only a matter of time, and their king was already gone. After a while, a large ship broke through the sky. The pure white body of the ship was somewhat similar to the Red Dragon King and the Silver Dragon King, but it had the complex cloud patterns of the Cloud State style. It was one of the few siege weapons in the world, the White Dragon King. Still 1,000 miles away, the dragon's mouth had already opened, and specks of light gathered. The light was condensed to the extreme, and a beam of light whistled through the air, like the roar of a white dragon. King Donglu raised his head to take a look. Unknowingly, the tribulation clouds had already begun to gather, but it was a pity that it had not been able to completely destroy the city amongst the clouds. However, at the moment, all that was left was this attack. Quickly block it. The experts of the Feathermen worked together to form a light barrier, but it was instantly penetrated, and the city amongst the clouds was about to be broken. A bright light flashed in the sky, and the speed was so fast that even the Shadow Cloud Crane King was stunned. Phoenix! It was the phoenix flying over, and he stepped on the city amongst the clouds with 1 foot, and his magnificent wings covered the city. The beam of light bombarded his body, and scattered into streams of light that filled the sky, but he was not injured at all. A phoenix cry rang out, and a glorious color dyed the heavens. Everyone's gazes were attracted by it, and they stopped what they were doing. As a member of the Feathermen, the Shadow Cloud Crane King was the most moved. Originally, the phoenix had not even passed the tribulation, and he had already developed feelings of admiration for it. Now, it almost turned into reverence, and he bowed down to it. Could this be the legendary 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix? King Donglu gave him a look, and the Shadow Cloud Crane King suddenly came to his senses. He tried his best to calm himself down, and asked, "May I know how I should address you, fellow cultivator?" Li Fengyuan, just now, thank you for your help. Fellow cultivator is the elder of my generation, it is only natural for you to lend a hand. There is no need to be so polite. The Shadow Cloud Crane King quickly declined modestly, and then asked, "What do you mean by this, fellow cultivator?" "I have already promised the Feathermen King, Bai Chen, that I will succeed the position of the Feathermen King, and protect the city amongst the clouds on his behalf." Li Fengyuan lowered his head slightly, and his pair of phoenix-like eyes flickered with brilliance. No one knew what he was thinking. "What did you say?" It was not just the Shadow Cloud Crane King, even the Feathermen were shocked. If not for Li Fengyuan blocking the White Dragon King's attack just now, they would almost have started scolding him. "Fellow cultivator, you really know how to joke. Didn't Bai Chen die in your hands?" Furthermore, you are not a featherman, so how did you become the Feathermen King? Bai Chen reaped what he sowed, and has already been executed. If not for his repeated requests for the position of the Feathermen King, I would not have bothered with it either. However, since I have made a promise, I will naturally fulfill it. I am already very tired today, fellow cultivators, please leave. Chapter 1162. Fellow, let me give you another piece of advice. You killed and devoured the winged human king. The winged human king will never forget today's enmity. You are raising a tiger and inviting calamity. Wanting to be some winged human king is wishful thinking. The Shadow Cloud Crane King's words were both to sow discord and the real situation. Li Fengyuan's eyes turned. As expected, the winged human powerhouses all had unconcealable hostility on their faces. Bai Chen's position in the hearts of the winged human king was unimaginable to outsiders. Between the tall white towers in the city amongst the clouds, the winged human looked up in fear. The gorgeous phoenix wings were like a burning cloud, reflecting a magnificent luster. Mother, a winged human child's face was full of fear. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Mother hugged her tightly. When she looked up, her worried eyes met that pair of phoenix eyes. Their names and even their experiences appeared in Li Fengyuan's mind. Right now, he felt a kind of closeness to all the winged human, as if they were his clansmen. He understood that this was the influence of Bai Chen's spiritual memories. He thought to himself, do you want me to have more feelings for them? He could not help but sigh. Bai Chen chose to give up everything at the last moment. Was it a great sacrifice touched by Bai Jie, or was it a helpless action after seeing that he had no hope of survival? Perhaps it was both. Humans were not plants, how could they be emotionless? They lived because of feelings, and they died because of feelings. However, compared to this small emotional burden, the benefits Li Fengyuan obtained were incalculable. Since Bai Chen did not resist at all and allowed him to devour and melt, he practically obtained a complete spiritual inheritance. Among them were Bai Chen's 7,000 years of cultivation, as well as all his power. This power and inheritance was so enormous that it was impossible to digest in a short time. And if they fought to the end, even if he defeated Bai Chen by a fluke, and was lucky enough not to be struck to death by the heavenly lightning, he would only be in a state where he had just passed the third heavenly tribulation. Moreover, he would be very weak, not to mention the spiritual inheritance. It was like two armies facing each other. The results were completely different between surrendering and fighting to the last soldier. Seeing Li Fengyuan fall silent, he fell into deep thought. East Lu King smiled slightly. A wise man submits to circumstances, not to mention the divine bird phoenix. And with his army pressing down, how could he allow anyone to stop him? The White Dragon King was at the back, and the high officials were at the front. East Lu King and Shadow Cloud Crane King. They were ready to launch a thunderous strike at any time. This was already a nation war, not a battle of magical powers. Li Fengyuan said, I know how much they like Bai Chen and how much they hate me, it's good that you understand. The Shadowed Cloud Crane King heaved a sigh of relief. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to make an enemy of the phoenix. Perhaps this was the instinct of all feathered creatures. However, Li Fengyuan changed the topic. But what does that have to do with me? I'm just doing what I want to do. How can I change because of other people's likes and dislikes? Alright, I don't want to be your enemy, but since it has come to this, we can only fight. All winged people, retreat to the city. Hearing Li Fengyuan's order, the winged men powerhouses looked at each other in dismay. Not to mention that they were unwilling to listen to the enemy's orders, there was no one to control the Cloud City's great formation. Wouldn't returning to the city be equivalent to waiting for death? Li Fengyuan did not say much either. He was confident that he could contend against the entire cloud region here, and he was not just relying on his own power. Otherwise, a Shadow Cloud Crane King alone would be able to keep him busy, so how could he protect the city amongst the clouds? Bai Chen had also left him a great gift, and that was the city amongst the clouds. Suddenly, the city amongst the clouds surged with white light. It flowed through every street like a river and gathered at the royal palace in the center of the city. A pillar of light soared into the sky and merged into Li Fengyuan's body, dyeing every one of his wings pure white as if he had turned into a white phoenix. Bai Chen had handed over the control of the entire city amongst the clouds' great formation to him. Just now, he was stalling for time in order to completely control it. The winged men powerhouses looked at each other in dismay. This was an authority that only the winged men kings of each generation could possess, and once they controlled the entire city amongst the clouds, they would practically become the winged men king. They transmitted their thoughts. What do we do now? If we continue to fight, we will all die here. Or should we retreat somewhere else? Shut up. As long as the city lives, we live. If the city dies, we die. If anyone dares to abandon the city and flee, he will be a traitor of the winged men race, and will be punished by heaven and earth, abandoned by both humans and God. Then we can only return to the city first. This is for the sake of the winged men race. Light flashed continuously, and more than 10 rays of light flew back to the city amongst the clouds. The speed of the winged men's escape light was rarely seen, and no one could stop them in time. Oh no! The East Lu King's expression changed drastically. He had originally wanted to use the city amongst the clouds to delay these winged men powerhouses, and then finally capture them all in one fell swoop. However, he did not expect the cooked duck to fly away. He shouted loudly, "Listen to me, attack the city with all your might." He activated the Cloud State Cauldron, the East Lu King's golden seal, and even the colorful clouds in the sky, pressing down on the city amongst the clouds. The Cloud Shadow Crane King's crane cry reached the 9 heavens, and the White Dragon King roared angrily. All the great practitioners took out their trump cards, and a torrent of power surged violently. For a moment, it seemed as if it could shake the heavens and the earth. The light barrier of the city amongst the clouds was already extremely thin, and there was no way it could withstand the attack. Li Fengyuan had already expected this. He landed in the city amongst the clouds and transformed into a handsome youth. He said loudly, "Success or failure depends on this. Give me your power." While the other winged men were still hesitating, the body of the mother who was carrying her child was the first to light up. Compared to hatred, she wanted to protect her child. Specks of light lit up in the city, and the bodies of all the winged men, regardless of whether they were strong or weak, glowed with white light. They merged into the whistling river of light and gathered in the main hall of the royal palace. Boom! The city amongst the clouds shook violently, as if it was a lonely boat that had fallen into a surging torrent. The tall towers and palaces collapsed one after another. Li Fengyuan stood above the royal palace and felt an unprecedented power converging on his body. This was the condensation of the winged men's power and spirit. He looked at the horizon with a grave expression. Could he actually block it? The winged men were also looking at him. The surging white light was like a pair of pure white wings that had spread out. It was as if they could see Bai Chen's figure again. Time became extremely slow. Every second was stretched out, and it became a kind of torture. If the great formation was broken, everything would be over. However, that thin layer of light barrier was on the verge of collapse. Although it was on the verge of collapse, it did not shatter. Its toughness was beyond everyone's expectations. A smile appeared on Li Fengyuan's face. With another wave of his hand, the cloud pillars erected around the city amongst the clouds and in front of the main hall lit up one after another. The bird-headed, human-bodied statues that were squatting on them suddenly came to life. They flapped their wings and welcomed the army of the King of East Lu. There were close to 100 of them. Every one of them was equivalent to a puppet king. As soon as the statues left the city amongst the clouds, a few of them were crushed by the torrent of power. However, they managed to block the majority of the attack. The light barrier stabilized and gradually became thicker. Li Fengyuan commanded the statues and changed the formation. He fought with the army of the King of East Lu. At the same time, he ordered the winged men, "The few of you, don't just stand there. All of you, counterattack." Although the winged men were not willing to listen to his orders, they could only help each other at this time. They were not good at close combat in the first place. Now that they were standing in the city amongst the clouds, they could launch an attack to their heart's content. Light whistled through the air, streaking across the horizon like thunder. They cooperated with the statues in their counterattack against the king of East Lu. Li Fengyuan looked up at the vault of heaven. The dark clouds of tribulation were slowly dispersing. The sun shone down brightly, speeding up the recovery of the light barrier. This was the true source of power for the great formation of the city amongst the clouds. The longer the battle dragged on, the stronger the formation would become. The shadow of a cloud suddenly covered the sky. The shadow cloud crane king looked down and met Li Fengyuan's eyes. Sparks flew. Give up, Phoenix. City amongst the clouds, rise. Li Fengyuan raised his hand. The city amongst the clouds rose to the horizon and crashed towards the shadow cloud crane king. The shadow cloud crane king stretched out a crane leg and lightly stepped on the city amongst the clouds. It stopped the city amongst the clouds from rising. Its huge crane wings still covered the sky. With a cry of a phoenix, Li Fengyuan shot up into the sky. Separated by the light barrier, he slapped the crane leg with his palm. Even if you are the divine bird of Phoenix, you have only just passed the third heavenly tribulation. How can you possibly? The shadow cloud crane king suddenly felt an uncontrollable, enormous power surging up from its leg. It could not suppress it. Glancing sideways at the city, it immediately understood that it had gathered the power of all the feather people. This was something that only the king of feather people could do. Layers of ripples appeared on the barrier. The two powers collided violently. The city amongst the clouds stubbornly rose up, straight into the astral wind layer. The higher it rose, the stronger the astral wind became. It whistled and slashed on the light barrier. Immediately, it became dimmer. However, the heavy attacks from the king of East Lu were also baptized by the astral wind. Their power was greatly reduced. Through Bai Chen's memories, Li Fengyuan understood that this was the most normal way of operating the city amongst the clouds. The great formation of the city amongst the clouds had the power to resist the astral wind. If an enemy invaded, it could raise the city amongst the clouds into the astral wind layer, making it difficult for the enemy to launch an attack. Although the great formation's endurance was limited and could not be raised too high, it was enough to ensure that no enemy could be higher than the city amongst the clouds. Otherwise, it would be a joke if the source of its power was easily blocked by others. No wonder the great Xia dynasty can't do anything to the feather people. This city amongst the clouds is simply a divine weapon of war. It is not something that the White Dragon King or the Red Dragon King can compare to. It is a pity that it was greatly weakened by the heavenly tribulation at the beginning. It is difficult to use all kinds of attack methods. Otherwise, it would not be afraid of a mere king of East Lu. A few crane feathers fell. They did not drift for long before they were cut into pieces by the astral wind. Even the 10 demon kings could not stay in the astral wind layer at such a high level for long. The shadow cloud crane king had no choice but to step aside. Before the sunlight could shine down, there was a loud bang. The cloud state cauldron heavily pressed down on the city amongst the clouds. Seeing that the cooked duck was about to fly away, the king of East Lu could not hold back and drove the cloud state cauldron with all his might. The cauldron, which gathered the power of the mountains and rivers of cloud state, was extremely heavy. The city amongst the clouds began to fall again. The astral wind cut marks on the body of the cauldron, but it was difficult to damage it for a while. At this rate, before the cloud state cauldron was damaged, the city amongst the clouds would fall to the ground. Li Fengyuan made up his mind and opened the light barrier. The cloud state cauldron fell with the astral wind. Li Fengyuan was the first to bear the brunt. Boom! The palace hall was reduced to ruins. Li Fengyuan's figure also disappeared from it. The feather people were shocked. Unknowingly, he had become the backbone of the feather people. If even he was defeated, the feather people would be in danger of being exterminated. The cloud state cauldron continued to fall with the city amongst the clouds. But from the ruins, a loud shout came from under the three-legged cauldron, close. The light barrier closed again and swallowed the cloud state cauldron. Li Fengyuan held the cauldron with both hands. Blood flowed down his face and turned into burning flames. He shouted, "You don't want it anymore? Then give it to me." Chapter 1163. Not good. King Donglu's expression changed. He felt his connection with the cloud state cauldron suddenly break. In the end, he had still underestimated the power of the city amongst the clouds. Not long ago, Li Qingshan came knocking, and Bai Chen attempted to lure him into the city. The city amongst the clouds had the ability to suppress everything and isolate the inside from the outside. Once one entered the city amongst the clouds, it would be difficult to escape no matter how powerful one was. Li Fengyuan laughed mischievously, and urged the city amongst the clouds to rise continuously until it reached the highest point in the sky. The astral wind stirred up thousands of ripples on the barrier of light, and the sunlight sprinkled down without any obstruction. The barrier of light slowly recovered its light. Although it was extremely slow, it was clearly in an invincible position. Li Fengyuan heaved a deep sigh of relief. All right, he had secured the city amongst the clouds. It was one of the most important spoils of war in this battle. Although they had sacrificed quite a number of human-faced bird-bodied statues, they weren't their own anyway, so they didn't feel the pinch. Your Majesty, what do we do now? A middle-aged man asked. He was also one of the honored guests of the king's manor, but he had only gone through 3 heavenly tribulations not too long ago, so he could not be like the Shadow Cloud Crane King and enter deep into the astral winds. Besides, even if he had the ability, he would not be willing to. The other cultivators also stopped their attacks in unison, clearly harboring the same thoughts. King Donglu and the Shadow Cloud Crane King looked at each other and could only sigh. Even the White Dragon King would quickly disintegrate at such a high altitude, let alone an ordinary cultivator. Coupled with the desperate resistance of the feathered men, it was almost impossible to take down the city amongst the clouds. If they were to disregard everything else, it wasn't like they didn't have a chance at all. However, a Pyrrhic victory was meaningless. Fellow Taoists, it's useless to continue fighting, so why don't we call a truce here? Li Fengyuan said proudly. Return the cloud state cauldron, and we'll mind our own business from now on, King Donglu said. Hey, you're thinking too much. Li Fengyuan rubbed his head. It was still in great pain. The cloud prefecture cauldron had hit him hard. I didn't hesitate to go against the winged people to help you, and this is how you repay me. The Shadow Cloud Crane King had never thought that things would develop to this stage. He vaguely guessed that Li Fengyuan would only be able to calmly take control of the city amongst the clouds because Bai Chen had given up on the dispute. If he had the chance to take charge of the city amongst the clouds, he was afraid that he would not be willing to be destroyed by others. Not to mention, he could also use this to suppress the entire winged human race and instantly gain control of a powerful force. As expected of the Feathermen King to be so decisive. Fellow Daoist, I will repay your kindness in the future. Please leave today. Li Fengyuan was quite grateful to the Shadow Cloud Crane King. Otherwise, there was an 80% chance that he would die here today. Regardless of what the other party was thinking, a favor was a favor, and he had to repay it. Let's go. The King of East Lu saw that things could not be done. Xiao Chen flicked his sleeves and left, returning to the White Dragon King. The Shadow Cloud Crane King also broke through the air and left. The rest of the lords looked at each other and dispersed. Only then did Li Fengyuan relax completely. He lowered the altitude of the city amongst the clouds a little and sped up the recovery of the Great Formation. The Feathermen in the city were still in a state of shock, but the Feathermen experts quietly gathered over, connecting each other with light rays, forming a 3-dimensional diagram, surrounding Li Fengyuan in the center. As expected. Do you want to rebel? Li Fengyuan sat high up on the cloud state cauldron, not surprised at all, as if he had already expected this scene. The city amongst the clouds is the Feathermen's city. What rebellion? Li Fengyuan, on account of your help today, hand over the control of the Great Formation, and the grudge between you and the Feathermen will be written off. You can leave on your own. Li Fengyuan looked up at the sky and asked with narrowed eyes, just now, you were the one who said that if there were more phoenixes, you would all eat a few, right? So what if I said that? Before he finished speaking, Li Fengyuan appeared in front of that feather man in a flash, so fast that none of the Feathermen experts could react. Li Fengyuan raised his hand and struck. Scram! That feather man flew high up, breaking through the air and flying out of the barrier of light. After the battle, his aura was already very weak. Sharp astral winds swept over from all directions, instantly tearing his body apart. Even his divine soul was shattered, and a ring of white light burst out. Good fireworks. Li Fengyuan clapped his hands. With Bai Chen's power and the divine power of the Phoenix bloodline, how many cultivators of the same realm could be his match? Although the Feathermen called themselves gods, in terms of talent, how could they compare to the divine bird that was favored by the world? Kill him. The Feathermen experts flew into a rage. Li Fengyuan pressed down with a flip of his palm. The three-dimensional diagram formed by the light collapsed, and all the Feathermen's power was pressed to the ground by a white light. In this city amongst the clouds, who could threaten the Feathermen king? There were still people who wanted to resist, and statues with human faces and bird bodies flew over and clustered around Li Fengyuan, glaring at the Feathermen experts on the ground like tigers watching their prey. Li Fengyuan suddenly sighed, and all of his high-spirited and proud expressions dispersed, revealing a sorrowful expression. I am in a very bad mood now, and there are many things that I don't know what to do. Do you really want me to kill all of you, and then kill all the Feathermen in this city? In that instant, all the Feathermen trembled in fear. Although Li Fengyuan did not reveal any killing intent, no one dared to doubt his determination. He was not only the son of the Phoenix, but also the son of Li Qingshan, and he had never lacked decisiveness in killing. Why did our king hand over the city amongst the clouds to you? A Featherman expert roared, full of resentment. Because at that time, only I could save all of you. Although at first he wanted to abandon all of you and have fun by himself, and also that woman. Li Fengyuan narrated everything that had happened in the heavenly tribulation, neither lying nor hiding anything. The Feathermen were shocked. Impossible, don't talk nonsense, how could His Majesty abandon us? It must be you. Shut up, you can believe it or not, but from today onwards, I am the Feathermen king. Those who are not willing to follow my orders, get out of the city amongst the clouds, or I will kill every one of you I see. Li Fengyuan returned to the cloud state cauldron, frowning as he looked toward the west. The sky was getting darker, and the red clouds were burning. The Feathermen experts felt the pressure on their bodies disappear instantly. Even though they were extremely unwilling, they knew that they would be courting death if they attacked now. They communicated telepathically to discuss what to do next, but it gradually turned into a dispute, resulting in a huge disagreement. Today, the Feathermen are unfortunate, the city amongst the clouds has been seized by the foreign race. We should take all the Feathermen and leave this place, building a new city amongst the cloud. You make it sound so simple. The city amongst the clouds is the work of our ancestors for tens of thousands of years. How can it be so easy to rebuild? What do you think we should do? Become the dogs of the foreign race? Who would do that? Who would be the traitor? We must not give up on the city amongst the clouds. Otherwise, we will be letting down our ancestors, and our clansmen will not be able to leave this place. The city amongst the clouds was too important to the Feathermen, not only as a place of emotional sustenance like their homeland, but also as a treasured land that all the Feathermen relied on for survival. Just the speed of cultivation in this city alone was far superior to anywhere else. It was far better than anywhere else. There was also the huge amount of resources sealed in the treasury. It also provided a guarantee for all the Feathermen to cultivate, and it was not something that could be abandoned at will, so the two factions argued for a while. Li Fengyuan did not care about the outcome of their argument. If the Feathermen chose to stay, they would be able to better operate the city amongst the clouds, and they would also have a group of powerful fighters. Even if all the Feathermen left and left him an empty city, it would still be a divine weapon of war, and he would not have to keep any promises to the Feathermen. I must tell the Tree King and her about what happened here. Although Li Fengyuan's strength was not the same as before, he could not help but shiver when he thought of that expressionless face. Thus, he drove the city amongst the clouds away from the layer of astral winds, and flew towards Qingju. The Feathermen did not question him again, but they knew that if they wanted to make a decision, it was best to make it as soon as possible. When the sky had completely darkened, the Feathermen made a decision. 5 Feathermen powerhouses brought close to 1/3 of the Feathermen and left the city amongst the clouds. The remaining 7 feather men powerhouses came to see Li Fengyuan together. We are willing to serve you as our king and listen to your orders, but we have a condition. Speak. When you ascend, you must return the city amongst the clouds to the feather men. All right. Perhaps because he had agreed too readily, the feather men were a little hesitant. Li Fengyuan sneered and said, "Do you really think that I am worthy of respect in this broken city of yours?" Although the feather men were not convinced, they had to admit that the phoenix had the confidence to say these words. "We believe that you will keep your promise, your majesty." At this moment, the city amongst the clouds had already left Yunju, and the sky was filled with stars. Li Fengyuan muttered to himself, "Eldest father, where exactly are you now?" The stars flickered, but no one answered. In the deep and dark starry sky, a feather was drifting, and 2 hands were holding each other's. "Where is this?" Li Qingshan asked. "The void beyond the heavens," Jiyu Yangying replied. Then, she hesitated for a moment before saying, Why? If I had known that this would be the result, I definitely would not have come. Do you regret it?" "I have never regretted anything in my life." "That's good. Otherwise, there would be more pain. Do you feel it?" "Our power is dissipating." Why is that?" "Forget it, pretend that I didn't ask." Li Qingshan could not feel any spiritual aura. Instead, his own aura, whether it was demonic aura or spiritual aura, was dispersing, as if they were being sucked dry by a huge invisible sponge. If this situation continued, they would soon die, and it would be a tragic death of starvation. "The stars here are really bright." The stars converged to form a bright sea of stars, like bright pearls embellishing a pitch-black curtain. As they drifted in the void, they were like specks of dust on a pitch-black curtain. At least this is the benefit. This is the scenery that I want you to see. My father once brought me through the astral winds to see it, but it was not as spectacular as it is now. Alas, we are really insignificant. The stars reflected in Jiyu Yangying's eyes, and she let out a childlike sigh. "All right, have you thought of a way?" Li Qingshan could not help but ask. In this short period of time, he had already done all the common sense. However, those powerful magical powers that could allow him to run amok in the 9 prefectures were useless here, and they would only be a waste of power. "I'm not thinking. It's precisely because there's no way that I say it's a gamble. You bastard, I don't believe that there's no way." Chapter 1164. If they can enter the Azura field and transfer to the Azura realm, all of their problems will be solved. Although the Azura realm is dangerous, it's better than being trapped to death in the void of space. But the Azura field didn't react at all. "It's useless, this place is outside the infinite worlds, the samsara is only connected to the other worlds," Jiyu Yangying said. "In other words, if we die here, we won't even be able to enter the reincarnation." Li Qingshan frowned. "Yes," Jiyu Yangying nodded. "With our strength, we don't have the means to cross the void of space. Can you refine that feather?" Li Qingshan asked again. "I can't, there's too little time. Let me try, but that's mine." Jiyu Yangying opened her eyes wide. "You are already at a time like this?" Li Qingshan angrily shouted. "Who told you to follow me? Bastard!" Li Qingshan pulled her in front of him and raised his hand high into the air, about to slap her. Jiyu Yangying didn't try to dodge and faced him with her head held high. Under the endless void of space and the endless stars, the two of them stared at each other. Li Qingshan lowered his hand. "Fine, I won't lower myself to your level. A person in need really is a man's heart. So, do you regret it now?" Jiyu Yangying asked again. "I have no regrets in my life," Li Qingshan answered. "Thank you for not killing me, but don't be angry, we still have a chance." "What chance?" "This feather, didn't you say you can't refine it? Even if it's you, it's impossible to refine this feather in a short period of time. Instead, it'll consume your own strength faster and you'll die even faster. But have you ever thought about it? Why did this feather just happen to fall into our world?" Jiyu Yangying's eyes flashed with a bright light. "There are so many worlds, it just happened to fall into the 9 continents. That's not right. Although the 3,000 worlds are too many to count, compared to the endless void of space, What are they? However, I don't think that this feather was deliberately thrown into our world. The 9 regions world is nothing special among the worlds. TMPH, that's not necessarily the case. I'm in this world. Perhaps this feather was prepared for me, Li Qingshan retorted, feeling that it made sense. Alright, if that's really the case, then I'll give it to you. Then I'll give this feather to you, Jiyu Yangying said. Just a moment ago, you treated this feather as if it were your own father. Why are you suddenly so generous? This is my Dao. Of course, it's even closer to me than my own father. However, you'd better pray that this feather isn't prepared for you. Otherwise, we'll be doomed this time. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? If it's not, and it just so happens to land in a world, perhaps it's being pulled by the world, or perhaps this feather itself wants to land in a world. Otherwise, what was the point of drifting about in this endless void? But all of this is just my guess. You think this feather contains some kind of will? Yes. If it really is an inheritance, then it must find a successor. At the very least, a world with a successor. So, you won't be at a disadvantage no matter what. Li Qingshan finally understood. If everything was as she expected, then they could survive. Naturally, this feather wouldn't belong to him. But if she guessed wrong, then everyone would die together. It wouldn't matter who this feather belonged to. Yes. Jiyu Yangying nodded with certainty. Why didn't you say it clearly just now? Li Qingshan frowned. If she had said it clearly, he wouldn't have gotten angry. Adversity reveals a man's heart. Jiyu Yangying smiled brightly. It was exactly what Li Qingshan had said just now. You're really getting more and more annoying. Li Qingshan shook his head. The feelings of love at first sight had long been thrown away. Otherwise, should we hug each other for warmth, and then confess our feelings when we're about to die? Should we make a solemn vow that we won't be born in the same year, month, and day, but that we will die in the same year and month? It's not like I'm little and Li Qingshan fell silent. Where was she now? Perhaps she was on the other side of some star. The distance between them had never been so far. They had once agreed to enter the 6 paths of reincarnation together. Only death could separate us. Sorry. Jiyu Yangying said apologetically. Yes, you're not little Anne. I'm very regretful now. Li Qingshan waved his hand again. That's very good. The 2 of us can hold hands and die alone in the endless void. That's fantastic. But I don't care about this broken feather of yours. He already had the best inheritance in the world, the 9 transformations of demons and gods. Although it didn't reject other powers, this green feather wasn't that simple. It definitely came from a powerful life form. Whether it was power or bloodline, it was probably not inferior to any god or demon. If he hastily refined it, it was very likely that the balance of the 9 transformations of demons and gods would be completely broken, and it would be difficult to recover. In fact, this balance had always been very fragile. Even the War Devil catalogue would be affected, let alone such an inheritance. So he didn't covet this green feather at all. Thank you, Jiyu Yangying said. Thank me for not fighting with you? No, thank you for coming to accompany me. If I were alone, I definitely wouldn't be able to smile now. Jiyu Yangying raised her left hand and clasped her ring finger and little finger with her thumb. Jiyu Yangying swears to the stars that I will do everything in my power to reunite Li Qingshan and little Anne. What if I break the oath? Li Qingshan glanced at her and said indifferently. Jiyu Yangying thought about it seriously. If I break the oath, I'll devote myself to you. Ah! Li Qingshan originally thought it would be something like I'll be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. When he heard this, he couldn't help but be stunned. What is this? This is a deadly oath, Jiyu Yangying said seriously. Deadly oath my ass. Jiyu Yangying laughed loudly. Her laughter was swallowed up by the silent void, but her expression became more and more carefree and unrestrained. Between life and death, there was great terror, but there was also great joy. Amidst this soundless laughter, the green feather suddenly glowed with a hazy mist of light. It continuously extended and changed until it transformed into a large green bird with a wingspan that spanned tens of thousands of miles. Li Qingshan and Jiyu Yangying were both dumbfounded. The green feather in their hands was now attached to the ends of the wings like two little fleas. They immediately understood who the owner of this green feather was. The back of a peng, who knows how many thousands of miles? Li Qingshan muttered. This was the feather of a rock. Looking at this rock that he couldn't see in its entirety, he suddenly thought of Oxen's back. There seemed to be some similarities between them. However, one was as steady as the earth, while the other was mighty and indistinct. Both of them were releasing an indescribable aura. The rock's sharp eyes gazed at the endless void, penetrated it, and locked on a distant target that Li Qingshan and Jiyu Yangying couldn't reach. It then raised its wings. Jiyu Yangying was excited. Sure enough, I was right. Heh, kid, hurry up. We're about to set off. Instantly, the sea of stars turned upside down. The vast starry sky seemed to become a spinning kaleidoscope. It also seemed like all the stars were falling together, and only they were rising. Like a fly following a horse's tail, it could travel thousands of miles. The endless void was nothing. They could go anywhere they wanted, and they could travel as far as they wanted. Jiyu Yangying cheered like a child in her heart. Chapter 1165. Qingju. A white cloud flew above the great banyan tree at an extraordinary speed, so low that it almost touched the crown of the tree. Li Fengyuan flew out from the cloud, but before he landed on the treetop, a white figure flew over and asked, "Where is your big daddy?" Under the gaze of those ethereal eyes, Li Fengyuan suddenly couldn't say what he had already thought of. Little and pursed her lips, as if she had already expected this. Her fate was linked with Li Qingshan's, and they could faintly sense each other. If she could sense his whereabouts, she would go to the ends of the earth to search for him. Why would she stay under the great banyan tree? That's the winged people's city amongst the cloud. Fengyuan, what happened? The banyan tree king's aged voice came, full of surprise. There was no cultivator in the world who didn't fear the existence of the city amongst the clouds. It's like this. Li Fengyuan took a deep breath and told him everything that had happened. Even the banyan tree king was amazed by the strange twists and turns, and couldn't help but worry for Li Qingshan. If he left this world in this way, it would be equivalent to being banished to the endless void, and that would be terrible. Little Anne's face was pale, and she subconsciously tightened her grip on the hilt of her sword, trembling slightly. Don't worry. Big Daddy is a good man, and the heavens will help him. He will be fine. Li Fengyuan almost thought that she was going to draw her sword and cut him down. For a moment, he didn't know what to do, and could only comfort her with the auspicious words of mortals. Although his power had reached the peak of the 9 provinces through various fated chances, he was still too young. Little Anne closed her eyes and slowly let go of the hilt of her sword. She calmly said, "I'm going to find him. He is no longer in this world." "How are you going to find him?" the banyan tree king asked. "Then I'll go to another world to find him." "It's not that easy to go to another world. Do you know how many worlds there are?" the banyan tree king sighed. "Then I'll go find them one by one." Little Anne opened her eyes and gazed at the distant stars. Although her words were filled with determination, even someone who didn't know how to read people's expressions could clearly feel that her heart was in chaos. "Rather than searching for him, why don't you wait for him to come back and find you? Otherwise, if both of you get lost in the vast Milky Way, it will be even more difficult for us to meet again," the banyan tree king advised in a gentle voice. In a short period of time, he had already used all his branches and carefully deduced all kinds of information to the extreme. He got a result similar to that of Jiyu Yangying. If that feather really was the legacy of some powerful godfiend, he shouldn't end up with the worst possible outcome of drifting in the void forever. Hearing this analysis, Li Fengyuan's eyes immediately lit up. That must be the case. Although that feather isn't a phoenix feather, it's definitely not inferior to the bloodline of the phoenix, not to mention its power. How could it wither away in the 9 prefectures for no reason? It's not like it's an ordinary bird, so it must have some sort of inheritance. Big Dad must have gone to another world. Yes. Little Anne nodded slightly. Although they were isolated from the endless void, she had a faint feeling that he was definitely still alive, but she didn't know if it was just her wishful thinking. At this moment, hearing the Banyan Tree King's words, she was even more certain that as long as he was still alive somewhere, there would be a time when they would meet again. Since that Commander Gu obtained that feather, she only needs to inherit the legacy within and cultivate a bit more. Then, she will be able to return here. After all, she came from this world. It's much easier for someone who left their hometown to return to their hometown than to leave their hometown and search for them in the vast world. Thank you for your guidance, Senior Tree King. I will wait here for him to come back. However, the Banyan Tree King had a hidden worry that he didn't mention. If Li Qingshan landed in the same world as the 9 prefectures, it would be fine. However, if he landed in a small world, he would probably immediately be strongly rejected by that world, and that would be a fatal disaster. For example, if a demon emperor forcefully entered the 9 prefectures, he would definitely be killed by the wind and thunder of the world without anyone needing to do anything. This was the basic law of the world. Furthermore, the possibility of this happening was very high. After all, among the 3,000 worlds, there were many more small worlds. I hope that he will be safe and sound. In a nameless world, the sky was filled with stars at this moment. The mountains rose and fell, and the rivers flowed endlessly. There didn't seem to be anything special about it. However, compared to the 9 prefectures, everything seemed small. However, although a sparrow was small, it had all the essentials. Other than the scenery of the mountains and rivers, there were also human cities. Even the starry palace lanterns couldn't completely illuminate the palace. All kinds of magnificence were drowned in the darkness. A dignified middle-aged man walked through the palace with his hands behind his back. Along the way, the guards and palace maids all knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the Alliance Master." The man ignored them and hurried to the front of a 100-feet-tall building. With a leap, a whirlwind rose under his feet, and he arrived at the top of the building. There was a small mountain 5 kilometers outside the city, and there was a Daoist temple on top of it. 2 elders happened to see this scene from afar. One of them was dressed like a monk, and the other was dressed like a Daoist priest. The monk's head was bright and shiny. Not to mention hair or beard, he didn't even have eyebrows. He looked like a big meatball. The Daoist priest's hair was messy, and his face was full of beard. He drank wine in big mouthfuls. The Alliance Master's Imperial Wind technique is getting more and more amazing. I think it won't be long before he can break through the void and ascend, the monk said. It's not that easy to ascend. How many Alliance Masters have appeared since ancient times? Not even 1/10 of them managed to ascend. I think this Alliance Master Zhong doesn't have the fortune to do so. Don't be jealous. In the last martial arts circle convention, you lost by 1 move. You can only live on this barren mountain and can't have fun in the city. The monk laughed. I'm not like you, who admitted defeat without a fight. I'm just an outsider, and I'm not too interested in the position of Alliance Master. I think you know you're no match for me, and you're afraid of embarrassing yourself. You really don't know what's good for you. I came to see you with good intentions, and now you're talking about me. Do you want to have a taste of my tiger-taming fist? The monk raised the corner of his eye, and suddenly there was a hint of killing intent. All right, bald donkey. My purple cloud incantation has improved a lot recently. I was just worried that I didn't have an opponent to test it on. In an instant, one of them was covered in golden light, and the other had purple clouds above his head. They were ready to fight. At this time, on the tall building in the palace, the Alliance Master Zhong cupped his hands at the small mountain. The 2 of them had no choice but to retract their genuine qi and return the gesture. Zhong Yuntian put down his hands, and there was no expression on his face. Anyway, they were separated by such a long distance, and they couldn't see each other's expressions clearly. So, he didn't bother to put on an act. He cursed, these 2 old farts, and continued to focus on absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Suddenly, a green light cut through the sky and landed in the extreme north. Chapter 1166. The Milky Way flowed in reverse, and the concept of time was lost. Li Qingshan couldn't even tell whether it was a second or a day. However, the joy that came from Jiyu Yangying's heart never changed, making him admire her craziness. This woman is just pretending to be a normal person. I've lived 2 lives, and I was almost fooled by her. His spiritual power continued to dissipate, first weakening, and finally almost exhausted. Death approached step by step. However, in this endless galaxy, it seemed to have become some kind of empty concept, causing one to be unable to feel actual fear. Instead, there was an even deeper emptiness that filled one's heart bit by bit. Perhaps Jiyu Yangying's guess was right, but when the rock feather searched for the next place of inheritance, it probably wouldn't consider the life and death of the 2 little insects attached to the feather. To be able to die in such a magnificent scenery, my life won't be in vain, but I still can't accept it. Qingshan, don't worry, this is a test. Jiyu Yangying transmitted her thoughts, and the joy contained in her thoughts increased. Is that so? Li Qingshan noticed that although she had also become very weak, her condition was a little better than his. The difference in strength between them wasn't particularly big, but it wasn't small either. She should have been even weaker, unless there was some other opportunity. And this opportunity was probably the rock feather. I can feel it, it likes me. Jiyu Yangying didn't hide the pride in her heart, as if there was some kind of compatibility between their temperaments. She felt that the rock feather approved of her, and a trace of connection was established between them. Although she hadn't yet obtained the inheritance, she believed that as long as she had enough time, she would definitely be able to go further. I hope it's not I like you to death. Li Qingshan made a cold joke. Haha, I, Jiyu Yangying, have a heart in the 9 heavens, and I will definitely soar. How can I die in this place? Jiyu Yangying was in high spirits, full of incomparable confidence. Li Qingshan rolled his eyes, but felt a sense of déjà vu. Bang. The starry river that filled the sky scattered, as if it had collided with something extremely hard. Then, it was instantly pierced through. The Kuan Peng transformed from the feather disappeared. A whole world came crashing down on him. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. Just as he was about to absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and activate his innate ability, he suddenly felt the whole world closing in on him. Invisible shackles extended into his divine soul. He was firmly imprisoned. Suddenly, he remembered the laws of the worlds. Not good. Boom. With an earth-shattering noise, everything fell into complete darkness. After an unknown period of time, Li Qingshan slowly woke up. Between the towering cliffs, the stars were shining brightly. He finally calmed down. He wanted to stand up, but he felt intense pain all over his body, and he couldn't move. He didn't know how many bones were broken, and even his meridians and body were severely damaged. In his arms was a warm body. Jiyu Yangying laid motionlessly on his chest. However, compared to his sorry state, she seemed to be in a much better state. Other than her slightly messy hair, her body was almost spotless. She was so quiet as if she had fallen into a deep sleep. What was even more infuriating was that there was a hint of a smile on her lips. It was obvious that the Kuan Peng feather had protected her. Li Qingshan heaved a sigh of relief. Even such a slight movement caused his internal organs to tremble. He simply laid there quietly, waiting for his injuries to recover. However, he immediately realized that his injuries weren't healing very quickly. He couldn't use any of his innate abilities, let alone other methods. Even the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was rejecting him. There was clearly nothing around him, but he could clearly feel a deep and enormous hostility. That was the hostility of the entire world. Just as he was about to focus his thoughts and understand his current situation, a pain that was thousands of times more intense than the pain on his body came from Jiyu Yangying. He wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of pain. It was the hot wind hell. As expected, the pain of hell followed him like a shadow. Once he left the void, the hot wind began to surge again. Jiyu Yangying frowned. Her eyelashes trembled slightly. She opened her bright eyes and smiled. Morning. Can I trouble you to get up from my body? Li Qingshan asked. What, are you hurt? Jiyu Yangying didn't have any intention of obeying. Obviously. Very good. Jiyu Yangying smiled brightly. I will take care of you because I am unharmed. He jumped up, but the soil under his feet suddenly collapsed. He missed a step and fell to the ground again. His head happened to hit a rock with a bang. Ha 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 ha. Li Qingshan didn't care about the pain on his body and laughed loudly. He had never seen her in such a sorry state before. I understand now. Jiyu Yangying sat up. Her previously spotless face was now covered in dirt. Understand what? This is a small world. TSK, I already knew that. Then do you know why I fell? Jiyu Yangying said as blood trickled down from her head. Phut, it's because our power is suppressed by this world. However, our luck isn't bad. This world is small enough. Not only is our power insufficient, our willpower is also very weak. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that we used up all of our power in the void. Otherwise, we would be struck by lightning and die. You better bandage your head. Dying from excessive blood loss is too laughable. You're right, but it's not luck. From now on, we don't have any more luck to talk about. Jiyu Yangying tried to tear off a piece of her sleeve. However, this transcendent magical robe of hers was too tough. Even if the power of all her magic was suppressed, the material of the robe wasn't something she could move at her current level. She thought of something and pinched the rock feather. She cut a long white cloth on her sleeve and wiped the blood off her face. Then, she wrapped it around her head. You look like your father died, Li Qingshan commented. If my father was in this world, I'm afraid he would have been killed by me. If he was a mortal, I would have killed him. If he was a mortal, I know my power has been sealed. Just now, although I'm a little carried away, I'm still looking at where I'm standing. However, the place I stepped on just had to be an empty hole. When I tried to adjust my body, there was a rock buried under the soil. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? It's practically a flawless trap. In other words, although this world doesn't have the ability to directly kill us, it wants to do so very much, so we'll be very unlucky. Li Qingshan seemed to understand something. He roused. Now, I have a title for you, the unlucky ghost of hell. Jiyu Yangying fell silent. I'm a little cold. Look, your scorching wind hell is still working, but at the same time, you're so unlucky, please don't say any more. I'll catch a cold. Jiyu Yangying covered his mouth with her hand. You don't seem too happy. Do you think I should be happy? You've won the bet, and it's a very big one at that. However, I feel more and more like I shouldn't have come. Li Qingshan gazed at the stars with his pitch-black eyes. He actually seemed rather melancholic. You should be happy, but because you already have something to worry about, you're unhappy. Jiyu Yangying touched his forehead. Her face blocked his line of sight. Li Qingshan was in thought. He had once abandoned Crouching Ox Village without the slightest hesitation, swearing that he would never return. To the current him, was the 9 provinces more worthy of nostalgia than Crouching Ox Village? He had once made up his mind to go to places he had never been to see sights he had never seen before, and to conquer the most powerful enemies. This place was not as lofty as the 9 heavens, but was it not a brand new world? The enemies he faced were even the heavens. Even though he was heavily injured, his fighting spirit should have been high, and he should have embarked on new adventures in high spirits, not reminisce about the 9 provinces. I know I can't replace Little An's position in your heart, nor do I plan on replacing him. However, I will do everything I can to help you, all the way until the day you reunite. I've sworn an oath. You sly woman. Do you think I can't tell? There seemed to be nothing wrong with this oath. As a matter of fact, it really was poison to her. This was not as simple as rolling around in bed. It was a change of path, an agreement of alliance, and a path of cultivation. However, to him, this was equivalent to giving up on searching for Little Anne. How was it possible for her to replace Little Anne's position? So you've found out. However, you should be able to understand me. If there are too many worries, I won't be able to advance bravely. Jiyu Yangying pulled Li Qingshan's arms and carried him on her back. She carefully and strenuously crawled out of the pit. Li Qingshan was momentarily speechless. Although he really wanted to say something hot-blooded like it's precisely because I have worries that I can advance bravely, he knew very well that his perseverance was not because of a certain person. Brother Ox naturally understood this, and so did little Anne. That was why in the Clam King of Mirage Sea's dream, even if he had forgotten everything, he still continued to walk. Otherwise, wouldn't his relationship with Han Cheongji, his friendship with the Banyan Tree King, and his father-son relationship with Li Fengyuan also be a kind of worry? She sighed. A heartless person like you is truly detestable. Ha, the same goes for you. Sigh, it's really too heavy. Carrying a person is like carrying a mountain. Jiyu Yangying's forehead was covered in sweat and she panted heavily. She glanced back meaningfully. Even scorching wind hell can't be used? Li Qingshan asked. Yes, only the punishment has been retained. Jiyu Yangying climbed out of the pit with great difficulty and gently placed him on the ground. Her hands were covered in blood as she frowned and said, "We must think of a way to heal your wounds, or it'll probably continue to worsen. We're too unpopular in this world." Before she had even finished speaking, a dull rumble echoed through the valley. Cracks rapidly spread across the cliffs on both sides. This could be said to be the effect of the collision just now had caused, but they could clearly sense the existence of heaven's will and deep malice. Boom! The entire cliff collapsed, turning into a torrent of rock and earth that surged into the valley. It looks like I've still lost the gamble. Jiyu Yangying smiled bitterly. In their current state, being buried by 1,000,000 tons of rock and earth would only lead to death. Aren't we going to run? Li Qingshan looked at a nearby colonel. Forget it. I didn't ask to be born in the same year and month, but I asked to die in the same year and month. Jiyu Yangying shook her head helplessly and sat down next to him. She looked at the incoming dust, but she showed no regret. Chapter 1167. Bang! A large hand covered in scars pressed against the ground, stirring up fine dust and smoke. However, the determination it contained seemed to surpass the surging torrent of mud. Li Qingshan, who was so heavily injured that he couldn't move, actually sat up. His body was covered in scars, but he was flowing with seven-colored splendor. Jiyu Yangying was slightly taken aback. She felt her waist tighten. The moment before they were engulfed by the landslide, a tornado roared and swept them up into the night sky. Li Qingshan stood on the tornado with his legs between his legs. His long hair danced like ink as he gazed into the distance. He could see mountains and rivers spanning thousands of kilometers. The valley below had already been completely filled with rock, almost becoming their burial ground. The starry sky was vast, possessing a splendor that rivaled the 9 provinces. Is the enemy this time the heaven? The sorrow of parting turned into fighting spirit. How could I be the type to moan and lament? Jiyu Yangying looked up, and her heart trembled slightly. He was still the same person. The rolling smoke and dust dispersed, and Li Qingshan slowly descended. His legs gave way, and he half knelt on the ground. His injuries were far from fully recovered. Jiyu Yangying hurriedly helped him up and asked curiously, "What kind of power is this? It can actually surpass the laws of the world. Divine talisman of great creation." Li Qingshan opened his palm, and a colorful and magnificent talisman with flowing splendor floated above it. It was the core of the school of Novel's power, divine talisman of great creation. In the crater, he tried all the powers in his body one by one, and finally found that this almost forgotten divine talisman of great creation was still flowing with splendor. Although it was also suppressed by the laws of the world and could only manifest the methods of Qi practitioners, it could not break through the invisible boundary of this world. But it was enough. I almost forgot that you're from the school of novels. I understand now. So it's the power of faith. Jiyu Yangying understood a little. The power of faith was an extremely special power, and the most common was that of Buddhist believers. No matter what world they were in, as long as they prayed sincerely, they could communicate with the gods and Buddhas. However, if it was used as a cultivation method, it would be too troublesome to gather, and it was not very useful in battle. Moreover, it was a consumable item. Therefore, very few people would take this path. At most, they would use it as a form of support to refine one or two treasures, such as the golden seal in the hands of the various prefecture overseers. If they were to fall into such a small world, it was also impossible for him to activate it. In this respect, the School of Novels was indeed a weirdo. Consider yourself lucky to have met me. Just now, that mountain-shattering scene. Being treated as an enemy by the world was definitely not just bad luck. But wherever there is a possibility of danger, there will definitely be danger. When encountering a mountain, it would collapse. If one went out during a thunderstorm, one would definitely be struck by lightning. If one did not have enough strength, one would not even be able to survive for a day. If Jiyu Yangying was alone, she would have lost her life here. As long as there's life, there's hope. Jiyu Yangying patted Li Qingshan's shoulder with a serious expression. It's too cold. I have no interest in dying in the same year, month, and day as a humorless woman like you. Of course it's best if you don't die. How are your injuries? Jiyu Yangying raised her eyebrows and smiled. At least I won't die. Li Qingshan moved his limbs and activated the divine talisman of great creation to continue healing his injuries. He reached out and touched Jiyu Yangying's head. Light flowed between his fingers. What a useful ability, but you better use it sparingly. I'm afraid we'll be trapped for a long time. Jiyu Yangying took off the bandage. Her injuries had healed, and her mind was much clearer. Although it was not a serious injury, she had no doubt that if it was not treated in time, it would still cost her life. You're right. I still have ties. It's not just little Anne. There are still all sorts of grievances that have yet to be settled. I have to return to the 9 states. How long will it take for you to completely refine this Kuan-Peng feather, accept its inheritance, and bring us back to the 9 states? It's hard to say. This world is really too small. It has restricted all of my power. I'm afraid I was stronger than I am now when I was born. Even if you gave me an artifact now, it would be difficult for me to refine it, let alone this Kuan-Peng feather. Jiyu Yangying also frowned. Her current situation was really not much better than an ordinary person's. It was difficult for an individual to fight against the world, even if it was a small world. As expected of the unlucky ones in hell. Things never go well. I think this is the luckiest place. Think about it. If we were in a bigger world, what would happen? If we were in a world bigger than the 9 states, what would happen? That's true. If the world was a little bigger, it would not be as simple as just restricting power. Instead, it would be directly bombarded by heavenly thunder and earthly fire. If they were in a world as big as the 9 states or even bigger, they would have attracted countless experts when they descended from the sky. Not only would they not be able to keep the Kuan-Peng feather, their lives would also be in danger. It was because this world was sufficiently weak that no one could react even after they descended for so long. It's really too weak. Could it be that they came on horses? Li Qingshan did not think that he had guessed correctly. There was a large group of people coming here. Actually, I have a feeling that it brought us to this small world because I thought about this when I crossed the void. I told you before, it likes me. As long as we can escape from here, I will definitely be able to refine it. Without the Kuan-Peng feather, how can we escape from here? If you can really control it with your will, why don't you want to return to the 9 states? Li Qingshan questioned. Of course, all of this is just my guess. It might not be accurate. Jiyu Yangying said seriously. In fact, if they wanted to keep this Kuan-Peng feather, returning to the 9 states would not be as safe as staying here. The fall of the meteor was too eye-catching. I can trust you. Give it to me. Li Qingshan extended his hand to grab the Kuan-Peng feather. Hey, what are you doing? That's mine. Jiyu Yangying struggled as hard as she could, but how could she resist Li Qingshan's brute strength? He forcefully pried her hand away and took the Kuan-Peng feather away. She could not help but widen her eyes and call out, Li Qingshan, how is it? Li Qingshan fiddled around with the Kuan-Peng feather and tried to power the divine talisman of great creation to analyze it. Sure enough, although it resonated with the phoenix slightly, it was greatly rejected by the spirit turtle, ox demon, and tiger demon. This made sense. The most powerful bloodlines had always been difficult to fuse with one another. The images of the remaining 4 transformations of the demonic and divine did not contain the Kuan Peng. If you're done looking at it, give it back to me. Jiyu Yangying made her way over. She was rather nervous. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. No matter how graceful and composed he was, it was just because he had not encountered anything important. He called out, "You short-sighted woman. The Kuan Peng feather is so extraordinary, yet you actually treat it as a regular arcane artifact or arcane treasure. If it possessed intelligence, it would definitely fly into a rage. Your strength might have been restricted, making you feel like you're extremely weak, but in the eyes of the owner of the feather, is there really such a great difference between your strength and weakness?" Jiyu Yangying shuddered. Suddenly losing all of her strength made her feel unprecedentedly weak. Now that she heard what Li Qingshan said, she suddenly felt like she had seen a ray of light. In the past, you were a frog in a well. Now, you've just become a worm at the bottom of a well. And when an eagle soars through the sky, probably even the well won't notice it. Li Qingshan fiddled with the Kuan Peng feather in his hand with certainty. If there really is a legacy in there, then the standard it uses to evaluate the successor definitely won't be strength, but something else. This was something he had personally experienced. An oxen had accompanied a mountain boy for his entire childhood, and it wasn't because he was very strong. "You're right." Jiyu Yangying's eyes sparkled, filled with undisguised admiration. Even when he saved her life just now, she wasn't this excited. She cupped her hands and said, "Thank you. In the end, my vision is still too narrow, and I take my own strength too seriously. Deal with it as soon as possible." Of course. Jiyu Yangying couldn't wait to take the feather from Li Qingshan's hand. Back to the original question. "I hope to return to the 9 prefectures as soon as possible," Li Qingshan said. "Now, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" "I'll tell you the bad news first. It took us across the void, and it consumed its own strength. Although it's slowly recovering in a way that I can't understand, it's really very slow. I'm afraid it'll take 100 years. 100 years. Li Qingshan frowned. Or 200 years. We have to accumulate enough strength for the next time we cross the void. Then what's the good news? Wait, I got it. Li Qingshan suddenly understood. The flow of time between a big world and a small world was different, and the difference could even be very big. A day in the heavens is a year on the earth was also very normal. According to the clues left by Brother Ox, the time ratio between the 9 heavens and the 9 prefectures was very likely to be 10 years for one day. The time ratio between this small world and the 9 prefectures might not be that big, but it was definitely not small either. 100 years was not a long time. In fact, it was only equivalent to a closed-door training in the 9 prefectures. Although this world imprisons us and wants to destroy us, it has given us the most precious time. I need time to obtain the inheritance of the Great Rock, and you also need time to sharpen your mind. After all, your cultivation speed is too fast. Those so-called geniuses spend 1,000 years to achieve it, but you only used 1/10 of it. However, some things can't be made up with talent. That is indeed good news. Li Qingshan nodded. Jiyu Yangying's words were very reasonable. Many times, an advantage was also a disadvantage. Mind, comprehension, and experience might sound illusory, but they had a great impact on a cultivator. The so-called bottlenecks basically all stemmed from these internal reasons. Back then, the Clam King of Mirage Sea's great dream had benefited him greatly. Speaking of which, it was actually quite similar to his current situation. He had also lost all his strength and experienced all kinds of pain and setbacks. That was still a dream, but he was now facing a real world, so the comprehension he gained would definitely be deeper. Chapter 1168. As the saying goes, heaven and earth are the furnace, and nature is the work. Since we are trapped in this world, let's temper ourselves well. Li Qingshan let out a great roar, which echoed through the dark mountains and forests. Although he had basically lost all of his power, the spirit he had forged through hardship and danger did not weaken at all. Instead, the more setbacks and difficulties he faced, the more tenacious he became. Chapter Jiyu Yangying looked at him with a smile. No one knew what she was thinking. She raised her hand to the sky and said, "As you wish, it's coming again." Dark clouds suddenly rose in the sky, covering the starry sky like a big curtain. The wind gradually sounded, with bone-chilling coldness. The snowstorm is coming. Jiyu Yangying took a deep breath of the cold air, and her mind became clearer. It was late autumn, and this place was a cold place. It was not strange for the snow to come. It could only be said that it came a little earlier and a little more violently. Just like what they had experienced just now, all the bad things that could happen would definitely happen. Everything is good here, but it's too boring. Li Qingshan said with a smile. If there were only bad things and no good things, life would be short of an unexpected joy. Yes, I'm a little cold. Let's go to a warm place. Jiyu Yangying hugged her arms and shivered. The restriction formation of this world was really powerful. Not only did it seal all their strength, but it also weakened their physiques. Without Li Qingshan's divine talisman of great creation, they would probably freeze to death in this world of ice and snow. And in a warm place, there would definitely be human beings, who could find ways to accumulate power for the divine talisman of great creation to fight against the endless disasters. Let's go. Li Qingshan felt that it was a little strange in his heart. Once they put aside their disputes, they could understand each other's thoughts with just a few words. This kind of tacit understanding only existed when he was with little Anne, but it was also a little different. Before he could carefully distinguish, howls sounded in the forest, as if they were crying, complaining, sad, and angry. Wrapped in the cold wind, there was endless mournfulness. "It's really endless," Li Qingshan said. "Who said that I would only be unlucky? My luck is here." Jiyu Yangying smiled. "That's true. I take back what I said just now." Li Qingshan nodded. He was thinking about how to go. The power of a world was so strong that it was hard to resist. It was almost boundless, but because its will was too profound and indistinct, it couldn't think and judge like a real living being. The whistling sound quickly approached, and pairs of green eyes lit up in the darkness. One by one, vigorous figures leaped about in the darkness. His weapon flashed with a cold light. "I think it's a monkey." Jiyu Yangying listened carefully. Due to the confinement of this world, her pair of eagle eyes were no longer as sharp as usual. She could only vaguely see a few black shadows leaping about. "It didn't look like a human. It's an ape," Li Qingshan corrected. The world in his eyes was still clear and colorful. Seeing Jiyu Yangying's appearance, he suddenly remembered that when he was still a teenager, he had once shed an ox's tear. But other than using it to find little Anne, it didn't have much use later on. Even ordinary Qi practitioners could see things at will, but he didn't expect that he was still not affected by the law of the world. Jiyu Yangying vaguely saw that they were surrounded by a group of apes, wearing armor and holding various kinds of weapons in their hands. Although they were constantly leaping irascibly, it seemed that they had been trained. They were in a joint attack formation, emitting a demonic aura that stirred up the flying snow. "Can anyone here understand what I'm saying?" Li Qingshan asked. The only response he received was still the howls of apes filled with hostility. He could not help but shake his head. After all, they were just diamonds. No, there were only 2 or 3 diamonds. The rest were all demonic beasts. Even if they could understand them, they would not be able to respond. "Who are you?" A strange and hoarse voice suddenly sounded, vaguely resembling the ape's howl. The apes all quieted down. They even bowed their bodies and lowered their weapons, like courtiers welcoming the arrival of their king. Li Qingshan looked in the direction of the voice. A bright sword light broke through the air. This time, Jiyu Yangying also saw it clearly. She couldn't help but let out a sigh. "Oh, it's sword riding." "Alas, yes," Li Qingshan said. In this remote small world, it was really too familiar to see someone riding a sword. The sword light whistled down and spun back into the scabbard. A white ape carrying a long sword stood 10 feet away. It was cold and arrogant. It was also wearing a robe. If it weren't for its monkey face, it would look more like a human swordsman. "TSK, It can actually speak human language. Li Qingshan sighed in admiration inside. This white ape had clearly not undergone the heavenly tribulation yet. In the past, when he was a demon general underground, none of the commanders of the demon soldiers under his command possessed such an ability. However, perhaps there was no need for him to communicate with humans. "Who are you?" the white ape said coldly. "My name is Li Qingshan. She is Jiyu Yangying. May I know your name?" Li Qingshan had originally planned to capture the two apes as mounts and send them out of the mountain. But seeing that they were also people he could communicate with and wouldn't be driven by this side of the world, he decided to communicate and have a third contact to save the power of the divine talisman of great creation. "Do you think the name of the White Ape King is something you deserve to know?" The White Ape King tilted its head slightly and frowned at the rather disheveled man and woman. It had been many years since humans had dared to intrude into its territory. Moreover, they were two ordinary people who hadn't even entered the innate stage. The man had a strong physique, as if he had practiced some hard body skills, but he hadn't practiced both internal and external cultivation. At his age, he was basically useless and wouldn't live more than 100 years. The woman was even weaker, but she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. Her grace, in particular, was so indescribable that even his mind was shaken. Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment. It had been many years since anyone had spoken to him like this. If there had been some demon king in the 9 states who had shown off to him like this, he would have immediately greeted them with iron fists. But now, it was an ape demon who hadn't even passed the heavenly tribulation. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had seen his fair share of kings, but he had never seen one this weak. "So it's Lord White Ape King. It's an honor to meet you. May I know why you're here?" Jiyu Yangying asked with cupped hands. Li Qingshan understood what she meant. She wanted to get some information out of him. Anyway, he wasn't really angered by the White Ape King, so he let her be. "Did you see the demon star fall here?" The White Ape King's expression softened. He had questions to ask as well. The descent of the demon star was a rare event that only happened once in 1,000 years. He had been cultivating at the time and hadn't seen it with his own eyes. He had only heard reports from his subordinates, but he had been unable to determine the precise location of the demon star's fall. It was only when he heard the sound of a landslide that he rushed over. However, he didn't see the demon star he had imagined, only this strange man and woman. He had seen the demon star that had fallen last time, but he had never imagined that the demon star would be a living person, and standing right in front of him. The demon star. Li Qingshan suddenly understood. The situation in which he and Jiyu Yangying had fallen was probably similar to that of a meteor. Chapter 1169. "I don't care if you asked or not," Li Qingshan said. The White Ape King grinned. "Interesting. It's been many years since anyone has dared to speak to me like that. Ever since it saw the two of them, it had felt an indescribable sense of disgust, especially towards Li Qingshan. It wanted nothing more than to get rid of him, and it had never intended to spare his life. Now, its murderous intent was aroused. The apes bared their teeth and revealed their viciousness. They brandished the weapons in their hands and approached him step by step, wanting to rip Li Qingshan to pieces. Communication is impossible. Li Qingshan shrugged at Jiyu Yangying. The White Ape King's hostility towards him was inexplicable. Could it be that it was also influenced by the will of the world? There was no lack of such a possibility. It was said that many people on the brink of death would lose their minds and try to seek death. The mysteries of fate were truly terrifying. "Li Qingshan, if you don't want to live, don't drag me down with you. Sir, I am willing to surrender." Jiyu Yangying raised her hands and walked towards the White Ape King, facing the blades of the apes. "You?" Li Qingshan was surprised. She was not much stronger than a mortal right now, but he understood what she was planning with a single thought. Although it was a risky move, it was still a good move. If it succeeded, it would save him a lot of trouble. The ordinary apes had not yet shed their bestial nature. They did not care whether she was a beauty or not, and the weapons in their hands were ready to strike at Jiyu Yangying. Let her come, the White Ape King said. This Jiyu Yangying was a rare beauty, and he could take her back to the cave and slowly enjoy her. Jiyu Yangying crossed the swords and walked through the ruins left by the landslide with great difficulty. She carefully tested the terrain with every step to avoid falling into another unlucky trap. The White Ape King saw it all. He dispelled the last of his doubts. Her martial arts were weaker than he had thought, and she was so cautious that she was almost timid. Her eyes stared blankly ahead, and it was obvious that she could not see clearly. But even so, there was still a strange charm to her that attracted his attention. Jiyu Yangying finally made it to the front of the White Ape King and heaved a sigh of relief. But he stepped on empty air. He fell forward. The White Ape King stretched out its arm, and Jiyu Yangying seized the opportunity to grab onto its furry ape paw. From start to finish, she had not shown the slightest hint of hostility, even at this moment. The White Ape King felt as if it had been struck by lightning. An indescribable and unimaginable pain. It had seized his soul. He felt like he was in hell. Jiyu Yangying's smiling face blurred into darkness. Only the sound of the wind could be heard. However, it became incomparably hot, and it curled up and fell to the ground. The 6 paths of reincarnation were omnipresent, and the pain of hell followed them like a shadow. This was Jiyu Yangying's only remaining ability. The ape demons were shocked and angry. They howled and charged at Jiyu Yangying. An energy saber swept out for 100 feet, stirring up snow in the air. Blood splattered and broken limbs flew everywhere, dirtying the snow-white ground. The howling quietened down. Li Qingshan held a long golden saber in his hand. It was not the Dying Blossoms, but the Dragon Slayer saber. The long saber only lasted for a moment before disappearing without a trace. Strange. Just now, although I spared no effort and condensed the energy of the saber to the extreme, its power is much greater than I imagined. Li Qingshan muttered to himself. It seemed that the various mysteries of the big and small worlds were not just the difference in the flow of time. The difference in the thinness of spiritual qi needed to be studied slowly. He moved like the wind under his feet, passing through the ruins and arriving beside Jiyu Yangying. He pulled out the huge sword on the White Ape King's back. A cold air rushed toward him, but upon closer inspection, it was nothing more than an ordinary spiritual weapon. It might not even be considered a high-grade weapon, and it did not have any spirituality to speak of. It was made of good materials, and the words "true steel" were carved on the hilt. He gripped the hilt with both hands and raised the true steel sword with great difficulty, slashing it hard at the White Ape King's neck. With a clang, like the sound of metal clashing, the huge sword was bounced off, but only a white mark was left on the White Ape King's neck. As expected of the White Ape King, Li Qingshan smiled. Although the White Ape King was known as the Monkey King when the tiger was absent, he was still a peak expert in this world. If it were not for Jiyu Yangying restraining him, he probably would have to expend a lot more effort. The White Ape King suddenly raised its head. At this critical moment, it had finally recovered a trace of consciousness from the pain, but it saw that its subordinates had all been wiped out, broken limbs and blood splattered all over the ground, and even it had fallen into the enemy's hands. Its expression was full of hatred. Such an expression was enough to make anyone in this world tremble in fear, but unfortunately, the person in front of it was not from this world. His willpower is not bad. Jiyu Yangying nodded. The spiritual qi in this small world was so thin, and to be able to cultivate to such a level was not an easy task. Perhaps it was limited by its vision, but its temperament was not bad. However, she was not too worried. This was the first time she had experienced such hellish torture, and it was not something that could be adapted to in a short period of time. Oh! Li Qingshan responded and swung the true steel sword again. He lamented that his ox demon's strength had declined to such an extent that he could not even wield a huge sword freely. Hey, don't really cut him down. Why don't you try to get him to surrender? If we can get the help of this white ape, we'll have a much easier time, Jiyu Yangying said. Don't waste your time. He's not some little demon, but a king of demons. Just his attitude alone will not allow him to surrender. Even if he does surrender, he'll be ready to retaliate at any time. It's too troublesome. Let me cut him down. Wait, Don't damage its fur. Let me do it. Jiyu Yangying pinched the Kuanpeng feather between her fingers. The White Ape King was enraged. He had actually been treated as an ordinary beast. In this desperate situation, the surrounding spiritual chi surged in, and his demonic aura suddenly surged. A gurgling sound came from his throat, as if he was about to break through. Suddenly, he felt a cold sensation in his throat, and blood gushed out. No, I should have seen through their abnormalities. How could two ordinary people enter so deep into the north? How could they have such grace? That man is 100 times more dangerous than any opponent I've met in my life, but he doesn't have much hostility. Why didn't I act carefully and instead wanted to kill him? Could it be? The final radiance of the setting sun before death cleared his mind and allowed him to understand many things, but it also gave birth to even more doubts. The coldness flowed into his wounds through his blood, filling his entire body. At the end of the day, he was just an ape demon who had not gone through heavenly tribulations. It was impossible for him to have the powerful vitality of a demon general or demon commander. After a short while, he collapsed in the pool of blood with his eyes wide open, and a layer of snow covered him in the blink of an eye. Li Qingshan felt a tinge of sorrow. What he was sorrowful about was not death. No matter when or where, dying in battle was not considered sorrowful. What was truly sorrowful was dying without knowing why. He was clearly so weak, but he thought he was strong and bullied others as he pleased. Such a way of dying was not just sorrowful, it was simply shameful. He reminded himself again, Li Qingshan, you're still nothing right now. The Demon King of the North Moon may not be much stronger than this White Ape King. It's better for you to step forward obediently. Chapter 1170. You've taken a lot of risks in this battle. Besides, you can't even survive now. Let's split it in half. Li Qingshan weighed the yarrow core in his hand. If they were in Jojo, such a few yarrow cores would be nothing to anyone, but now they seemed precious. This is not the time to be even. At the same level of cultivation, your strength is far above mine, so let's focus on helping you recover first. This way, both of us will be safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so generous. Besides, it's not like I've come up empty-handed. I'm going to try some food. Help me put away the ape meat. You really want to eat it? Li Qingshan was surprised. The broken limbs and blood on the snow could make even gluttons lose their appetite, and the White Ape King's corpse on the ground looked very much like a human. It might not taste as bad as it looks, but it's still spiritual meat, so it's worth a try. Let's go find the White Ape King's cave before the snow covers our tracks. As he spoke, the snowstorm grew stronger. The pieces were like goose feathers, moving up and down with the wind. The world was chaotic. Li Qingshan didn't waste any time. He conjured a big bag and swept all the ape demons' corpses into it. Then, he carried Jiyu Yangying and flew into the wind, disappearing into the snow. All that was left was a vast expanse of white snow, covering the blood and ruins. Li Qingshan opened his eyes wide and searched hard. The ape demons moved quickly and left very few traces. Plus, they were in the middle of a snowstorm, so it was especially difficult to find them. The cold was pervasive and deep. Li Qingshan hadn't felt such a chill in a long time, and Jiyu Yangying's lips were blue from the cold. If this went on, she would fall seriously ill. She had to use the divine talisman of great creation to create a warm current. Try to save energy. Don't be so warm. The hot wind hell still makes me feel warm. Jiyu Yangying snuggled up to Li Qingshan, using each other's body heat to keep warm. Warm? Li Qingshan shook his head. This was an insult to hell. He felt a burning pain in his soul, as if he had fallen in the middle of a desert, and the water in his body was being smoked dry. Yet, he remained clear-headed. If there was no obsession, even death would be close to freedom. But what was truly warm was the soft body under her thin shirt. The wind and snow howled, and the world was in chaos. It was as if the two of them were the only ones left in the world. Refused to accept fate. Against the whole world. This feeling could not be described with words. Li Qingshan lowered his head and glanced at her. Her handsome smile was a little stiff from the cold, but she was still smiling. Like the spring breeze in March, his pair of eagle eyes were still firm, but his true feelings were hard to detect. "Watch where you're going." Jiyu Yangying looked back at him. "The snowstorm is too strong, so the trail has been cut off," Li Qingshan said. "Let's think of another way. Don't forget our agreement. We're only friends, not lovers." "I can't forget it. You should stop feeling so good about yourself," Li Qingshan said disdainfully. "I'm just reminding you. After all, a man and a woman are living together in the same world. However, I believe that we are not people who are affected by the environment." "Are you saying that to yourself?" "Yeah," Jiyu Yangying said calmly. Even if they could go through life and death together, she had to keep her heart to herself. "Understood." Li Qingshan waved his hand, and the divine talisman of great creation shone with 7-colored brilliance. A black spirit dog materialized and landed lightly on the snowy ground. Its sharp nose sniffed around, and then it went into the forest. The 1,000-foot-high mountain cut through the wind and snow, pointing straight to the sky. There was a flickering light on the top of the mountain, like a star guiding the way, but it was a brightly lit villa. On the precipice of the south peak, 4 words were carved: "The World's Sword Sect." Everyone who came here for the first time would be amazed by the incredible sword skills of the person who carved the words, and the heroic spirit of looking down on the world. However, there were exceptions today, and there were 2 of them. "This white ape sure talks big," Li Qingshan said. "In this world, he probably lives up to his name." At the Qi practitioner level, demons have a clear advantage in terms of physique. Add that to his innate magical powers, and his intelligence that is not inferior to that of humans, and I'm afraid it will be hard to find a match for him. Yes, but in a world with such thin spirit Qi, it's not easy to nurture such a monster. Li Qingshan rode the wind and landed in front of the villa's gate. The gate was huge, and there were 81 nails on the gate, giving off the aura of an emperor. However, what sat in front of the gate was not a stone lion, but a pair of stone apes. There was a faint power shrouding the whole villa. He said in surprise, "There's actually a formation, but it's very low level. It's enough to deal with Qi practitioners. Here, this is a formation plate, but I'm afraid you have to go to the eye of the formation first before you can replace its owner." Jiyu Yangying took out the formation plate from the White Ape King's waist, and confirmed that there was no such thing as 100 treasures pouch in this world. Otherwise, the White Ape King would have it. The difference between this world and the 9 states was not that all beings above Qi practitioner were removed, but that the entire way of cultivation was backward. "I'll go call the door, Chem." "There's no need." The vermilion gate suddenly opened, and dozens of shadows swayed inside. Firelight reflected off the snowy ground, dragging the shadows of Li Qingshan and Jiyu Yangying behind them. "Who dares trespass into our ape deity villa without permission?" the middle-aged man in the lead shouted. His face was fiery red, and his voice was as loud as a bell. The short beard under his chin was very finely trimmed, adding a touch of elegance to his appearance. He was the world-famous Marquis of the Blazing Flame Sword, Hu Hongtao, a Grandmaster of the Sword at the 9th tier of the innate level. He was bewildered by the 2 people in front of him, not knowing how they had passed through the many hidden checkpoints on the mountain road to get here in this snowstorm. An expert like him would naturally not take the mountain road, and would directly ride his sword up. However, these 2 obviously looked like ordinary people, and they were carrying such a large cloth bag on their backs. Moreover, the cloth bag reeked of blood. They had come with ill intentions. Li Qingshan and Jiyu Yangying looked at each other. They did not expect there to be so many humans in the White Ape King's lair, but it was exactly what they wanted. With more people, they would be able to quickly understand the world around them. "Do you still want to speak?" Li Qingshan asked Jiyu Yangying. "You do it." "All right." After their encounter with the White Ape King, it was clear that the gentle approach was not very suitable, so they might as well show their strength. With a wave of Li Qingshan's hand, the cloth bag disappeared, and the severed limbs scattered on the ground. The most intact part was the White Ape King's corpse. "Ah. That is." The crowd was in an uproar, and they all retreated. "Your Highness." Hu Hongtao was the only one who did not move. He stared at the White Ape King's corpse as if he was possessed, and muttered, "No, this is impossible." The world-famous White Ape King had led his subordinates out of the villa for less than a day, and yet it had ended up in such a tragic state. The image of the demon star streaking across the sky brought a phrase to everyone's mind: the demon star descends, bringing disaster to the world. Hey, this old ape is still a king. From today onwards, this place is under our control, and you are all my subordinates. Li Qingshan announced in a loud voice as he stepped forward. The crowd retreated again, their faces filled with fear. I will guard the ape deity villa on behalf of the White Ape King. If you dare take another step forward, don't blame me for being rude. Hu Hongtao's heart was thumping wildly as he stood firmly in place, his hand gripping the blazing sword at his waist. He had already calmed down, and a most logical conjecture came to him. Do you think you can scare us with a mere illusion? Yes, it must be an illusion. Your Highness is wise. It's another trick of the demonic path. The swordsmen all came to their senses and drew their swords. You say this is an illusion? Li Qingshan had a strange expression on his face. Were the bastards of this world really that unmoved by force or persuasion? Did they really want him to go on a killing spree? I didn't expect the Phantom Dancer to have a successor, but to come up with such a laughable illusion. Doesn't he know that even if that old witch came personally, she wouldn't be able to harm a single hair on the Ape King's head? Hu Hongtao was more and more convinced of his judgment. He glanced at the ape corpses on the ground with contempt. It would have been fine if they had been poisoned. Although the chances of that happening were pitifully small, it was still easier to accept. However, it was impossible for them to have been torn to shreds with such a heavy hand. Moreover, the biggest loophole was not this, but the beauty of the woman. Compared to her, the beauties collected from all over the world in the White Ape King's palace were like ordinary cosmetics. How could there be such a stunning beauty in this world? The only explanation was an illusion. At this thought, he couldn't help but take a few more glances. Fake, everything is fake. Kill these two demonic remnants. Someone shouted proudly. I'm so tired. I really can't communicate with them anymore. Li Qingshan let out a long sigh. If you don't believe me, you can come and check. Jiyu Yangying shrugged helplessly. Don't go, Your Highness. Who knows what's going on? Yeah, let's kill them first. Forget it. Let's go in first. Li Qingshan pulled Jiyu Yangying and rushed through the door. He clenched and opened his right hand, ready to slay the dragon. The forest of swords seemed to repeat the scene just now. Without Hu Hongtao's order, no one dared to make the first move. Hu Hongtao stared coldly at the approaching Li Qingshan. The hand holding the sword ignited with a flame. I don't care what kind of demon or ghost you are, I'll cut you down with my sword. However, a trace of uneasiness gradually welled up in his heart. Compared to the woman's stunning beauty, the man's appearance was nothing special. His body could only be considered tall, and he seemed to have practiced some external hard body skills. From beginning to end, there was nothing frightening about him. However, in the flickering flame, he exuded an indescribable demonic aura. I advise you not to try. I'm in a bad state right now, so I can't hold back. Li Qingshan said sincerely and walked past Hu Hongtao. With a clanging sound, the flame suddenly appeared. More than half of the raging fire sword was unsheathed. To everyone's surprise, Hu Hongtao, who was like a raging fire, arrogant than a noble, did not make a move in the end. His face was flushed red. Only a few people noticed that the moment he passed by, Li Qingshan put his fingers together like a sword and made a gesture. After a moment of contemplation, his face also changed. Hu Hongtao ordered, "You two go and check carefully. The illusion is not completely flawless, and it can't be maintained forever." The two braced themselves and went forward to check back and forth for a while. They said in a daze, "Your Highness, it doesn't seem like it's not an illusion." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.